Good evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's Tuesday, January 8th, 2019. We are at the Veterans Memorial Hall. It is 6 p.m. All council members are present. At this time, I will call the meeting to order and ask for a temporary moment of silence. Thank you. Councilmember Heller, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, is there a closed session report at this time?
Mr. Mayor, no reportable action.
Thank you. At this time, we will move to council members and mayor's reports. Who would like to begin? Mr. Heller, Councilmember Heller.
Yeah, I have an announcement. It's actually a repeat of the announcement I made at the last meeting, which is we have lots of great openings on the advisory committees, a chance for citizens to participate at a deeper level in our government. We have 2 openings on the Planning Commission. The PWAB, which is the Public Works Advisory Board, is one opening there. CFAC, which is the Citizens Advisory Committee, 4 openings there. The TBID has 4 openings, and the Harbor Advisory Board has 2 openings, so a total of 13 openings. I urge you to apply. The deadline is Friday, and interviews will be next week. Thank you.
I'll go next. I just wanted to announce that I was very fortunate to draw the winning name of the 21st car giveaway. This is a wonderful program that is a collaboration between Todd's Garage, he fixes the cars, the Lions Club, who actually contributes and oftentimes buys used cars, and the Community Resource Connections Office, Sharon O'Leary, who screens applicants for the free car giveaway. And so there is a nice young man who is driving around in a very old but refurbished Toyota, thanks to this program. And so I just wanted to make that announcement. And then also, the Bird Festival is coming up January 18th through the 21st. This will be the 21st year of the Bird Festival. And I believe the chair was going to come and make an announcement, but if he doesn't, please check out. The headquarters is at the community center, and the council is invited to the opening reception, which is Friday night.
Yes, I want to recognize one of our special Morro Bay citizens tonight, Meredith Bates, for the contributions that she makes to our community. Meredith was a founder of the Morro Bay Action Team, and she was also a founding member of the Morro Bay Citizens Bike Committee back in the dark ages of 2001. And she served as one of the committee's first presidents. Most recently, Meredith joined the board of directors this year for the Morro Bay Active Adults, and she took on the job of transportation coordinator, planning special trips for our senior citizens. So I want to thank Meredith tonight for the many ways that she serves our community. And I will have office hours this Saturday from 9 until 10 at Sun and Buns down on the waterfront. And anyone is welcome to come and talk to me about anything. Thank you.
I have a couple community announcements. One is that the Rotary Club of Morro Bay Sunset is going to have a presentation from the Peace Academy of Science and Arts from San Luis Obispo, and this is a new school that is being developed on the Central Coast to focus on peace and science and the arts for K-12 education. So that'll be Thursday, January 10th at 6 p.m. at the Morro Bay Community Center. And then the Women's March has our third annual march on January 19th. And so that's the Truth to Power March. It'll be at Mitchell Park at 9 a.m. with the march at 10 and music at 11.
Great, thank you. Happy New Year to all of those that are here tonight and those in TV land. I wanted to shout out for the Chamber of Commerce annual event. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, if there are still tickets available, that's occurring this Friday the 11th from 5:30 to 9 p.m. It's always a great time of celebration and passing the baton between chamber members and elected chamber board members as well. And so we invite you to come out and enjoy that time. If there are no other announcements, Mr. City Manager, any announcements from you, sir?
No, just wanted to wish everybody a Happy New Year and no staff announcements.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, we do have a presentation. We have Mrs. Barbara Spagnola here, the chair of our Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, representing also Measure Q, and this is the annual report for Measure Q. Thanks, Barbara, for being here. Appreciate your leadership in that committee. Good to
Ready? All right, thank you. You here?
There you go.
Thank you. Good evening, Barbara Spagnola, Chair of the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee.
Hold on one second, Barbara. Having a little bit of, we're going to get some help coming from the back. Thank you. AGP. One of our capital improvements, we've got new cords now being installed. Real time for the first
You
time.
might bring that to Measure Q next year.
Thank you to the City Council for that, and authorizing that this year.
21st century update to your IT.
Brings us into the early 1800s. Thank you. By the way, that's no reflection on AGP at all. That was an internal joke regarding the city.
Sounds good. Hello, testing. Okay, we'll try again. Good evening, council members, mayor, city staff, and citizens. We're here with the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, and we want to give our annual report to the citizens and city staff and council leadership. So the agenda this evening will be to summarize the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee's review of all the Measure Q transactions for the previous fiscal year from June of 17 to, July 1st, 17, June 2018, and also report on our other activities for the past year. We met. Thank you. The members of our committee, we met in December 2018 to review and discuss all the Measure Q fiscal year transactions. And for those in the audience that don't know, that's the 1/2 cent sales tax initiative that was passed by the voters in 2006. And so in that particular initiative requires an annual review by a Citizens Oversight Committee, which the Citizens Finance Committee is performing that function currently. The members are listed there. We have Dawn Addis on the council Council was part of our team last year. Bart Beckman, David Batant, John Irwin, Walter Heath, and John Martin. John Martin and Dave Batant are also in our audience. Thank you. And hopefully I didn't miss anybody. So the Measure Q financial summary, I'm on slide 2. This is included in your agenda packet. The total revenue for the year has been increasing steadily every year, which is good news. It was over $1 million, $1,062,000 plus. The total expenditures on the fire, public safety, storm drain, and street maintenance was $952,000 plus. So as you can see, we spent about $110,000 less than the revenue that was taken in. So what that does is that goes back to the Measure Q fund balance. We call it a carryover balance. And last year that carryover balance was about $73,000. So you can see now it's $184,000. About a fourth of that, $38,000, is the debt service reserve on the fire station alone, and the remainder is unassigned amount of $145,000. I'll address that a little bit later in the presentation on our recommendation on that at this time. So, moving right along, slide 3. Here's where the Measure Q monies were spent. Fire department, $402,000. Police department, $23,000. On the fire department, some of that is a good portion of that is labor for the vacation relief to have 4 firefighters on duty at all calls, and also the debt service, that $83K, that is for your fire station loan. And then also purchase of some safety equipment. I believe it was a generator and a fire hose last year. Police department, smaller amount this year, standby pay, and then there was also a payment to the SLO sheriff. I believe that was for the special operations unit and the bomb team, if I'm not mistaken. So that's where those monies were spent. In addition, the majority of the Measure Q, $526,000, was spent on street maintenance. And just for your information, that only represents about 58% of what was spent during the year on street maintenance, because they actually spent about $844,000 due to a SB 1, Senate Bill 1, and some California state grants. Are you guys hearing me okay? I'm getting a lot of back. Okay. Thank you. In addition, we have some street maintenance rental equipment, and we also have some ADA sidewalk we were on slide 4. Go back one. A couple, that's the end. Perfect, thank you. So on this slide, I had the street maintenance, I mentioned that, as well as the ADA sidewalk repairs, approximately slightly under $15,000. In our review, the CFAC did make a note that the Measure Q funds, generally speaking, should not be used. We would not recommend they be used for ADA compliance issues. We didn't think that was part of the street maintenance repair or part of the original intent of the voters. However, this year, and it wasn't brought to CFAC ahead of time like it usually is, it's because it was a timing issue, and I think there was some lesser money spent in street maintenance, and they had to do some curb cutouts, and that's what it was. But that was our only recommendation there. We are not recommending there be any change or reversal of charges. It's just for future reference. We think if we were to set a precedent and continue to spend for ADA, in theory, all the money could be spent on ADA for Measure Q. So that's where we were coming from on that recommendation. Hopefully that's clear. And then the storm drains was 0. We hear on that, since that is included in the original ballot measure. However, now, as you all know, the one water plan has been updated with the CIP, Capital Improvement Projects, to include work in this next fiscal year on storm drains. So there was nothing last year pending the one water plan, I believe. So that's our comment there. Any questions, or can I charge through while the... Okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we had a few recommendations. Number one, we've approved unquote unaudited Measure Q transactions during the last fiscal year. The audit is almost done, I understand. For the carryover and unallocated cash, in previous years, sometimes we've made recommendations particular to the diverting any excess funds to the street maintenance program. This year, what we decided is we don't have any specific recommendations at this time. Since we're involved in the mid-year budget review, we will perhaps, if everybody agrees, come back with some specific recommendation on that. So for right now, we have no specific recommendation. Leave the carryover balance as is for now. And then, obviously, continue progress on the funding categories identified in the ballot initiative. These are some of the things that we believe we've accomplished this year or played a part and role in accomplishing, so that you know what we're involved in. The review and recommendation of the first bullet, the CAFR, that's very important. CAFR, that stands for the Comprehensive Annual Finance Review that is done by city staff. It's an optional report. This year was about 150 pages. It's, I think, the second fiscal year it has been completed, or third, perhaps. And we feel that that's what you see best-in-class cities doing, this kind of optional report. We've had recognition on this report previously, so the CFAC just played a partial role in just reviewing that and making some recommendations the previous fiscal year so that the report would get even better the next year. So, plus we're involved, obviously, in budget reports, review of quarterly investment reports, test case for the OpenGov portal, for the citizens, the citizen-friendly budget reports, and then we've also provided some miscellaneous oversight and recommendations on certain projects that were brought to us. For example, the implementation of the PO system. We've heard about that from citizens for a couple years. That's finally almost done, so we've had involvement of that. I think there was a recommendation to centralize some of the accounts payable functions, so we gave some minor input to the fiscal emergency plan, purchase of the fire engine, the procurement process. We looked at that as the financing options as well as justification for a sole source on that. Pay down of the fire station loan or the down payment on the fire station loan, accelerating a payment on that based on the sale of the Coral Avenue property, I believe will also be involved as that sale is now transacting. We'll be involved in that next year as well. And also we made the recommendation that to try to increase our interest in our membership, that the term for the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee members be 4 years, consistent with the other advisory boards, not 6 years. So, so those are some of the things we did. And finally, here's what we think we'll be doing per your leadership and suggestion and direction. We will be welcoming and transitioning new members. As Mr. Heller mentioned, there are 4 openings right now. We'll continue the Measure Q oversight as we are required to do by the ballot initiative and continue to report to all of you as well as all the citizens. We will stay involved, if you would like us to, in the comprehensive annual financial report, enhance some of our public-friendly budget reporting. We've been doing that off and on for probably about 2 years now. We want to very much participate in the mid-year budget process as well as the review of what next year's Measure Q expenditures will be, so we can provide our opinion and guidance on that. And finally, I'd like to thank not only everybody on our team. It's been a team effort, and we've been working on this for years, so I think we're gradually making some progress. But also Jennifer Callaway, our finance director, and Scott Collins, our city manager. They have helped us immensely, especially with the transparency on the citizen-friendly documents. And I know also that the city recently received a certificate of excellence for the 2018-19 operating budget from one of the government agencies. So I really want to thank them for that. I think we are making progress, and we want to continue to make progress. So are there any questions? I have some of our team members here, and we have a copy of the CAFR, so if you have any questions, we're good to try to answer them.
Thank you, Barbara. Council members, any questions of Barbara?
Barbara, I just wanted to thank you for your service over the years to this effort. I agree that the improvement in the public, making these figures digestible by the public has been significant the last few years, and your leadership of the CFAC has had a lot to do with that, and I want to thank you for the time you've put in on this, as well as everyone on the committee.
Thanks, Jeff. It's a team effort, and we're trying.
Well, I had a few questions for Barbara, but I received answers, and she addressed them in the presentation, so I won't ask them. But I also want to thank her. I had the privilege of serving with Barbara on the CFAC, and it's just a tremendous progress has been made with that committee, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
To my left.
I want to echo my colleagues. Great job. Really appreciate what you guys do to help us with our finances. Thank you.
I'll be brief, but thank you as well to the committee and for your support. And I want to echo what Jeff said earlier about encouraging folks to apply for the CFAC. I think it's highly important work that's being done for our city and all on a volunteer basis. So thank you to that committee.
Barbara, thank you so much for your leadership, as has been expressed by all the council members. We appreciate the tremendous amount of information that's processed through your committee and the tremendous efforts involved by all committee members. Please thank them for us, and we look forward to your continued leadership. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
You're quite welcome, and thank you as well to the CFAC and the city staff and the citizens. We do have some citizens working behind the scenes helping us and giving us comments, so you may not see them at the meetings, but we are hearing from them, so thank you.
I feel like I want to clap, but I'll withhold that because we're not supposed to do that, right? Can't do that. Can't clap. So I'm doing the wave thing. Great. So is that time for public comment? I want to just make a couple of public comments for public comment. And starting this new year, one of the agenda items tonight is to specifically look at page 1 of the agenda and consider potential changes to that. We'll be looking at our Code of Civility and the existing ordinance that we have regarding civil discourse. What I did want to mention up front, and I received a number of emails from individuals in the community, and it had to do specifically with the public comment and requirement to fill out a speaker's slip and/or the requirement to state your name publicly and your place of residence. Let me tell you that beginning now, there is no requirement to fill out a speaker's slip, nor are you required legally or bound by any regulation that the city has established to state your name and or your residence. So if you wish to speak anonymously, that is your right. We respect that. That is a privilege that is extended to everybody in a meaningful democracy. And tonight, I just wanted to make sure that was known. However, I will take those that have filled out speaker slips first, call on them, and then open public comment to anybody else that hasn't had the desire or intended to fill out a speaker slip. Just wanted to make that clarification for you. I know on this front page it does say we shall do the following, but again, I wanted to clarify there is no requirement for stating your name, address, or filling out a speaker slip. So with that, I'm going to open public comment. We're going to start with our business spot. Thanks to Jan Goldman for continuing to help provide individuals that are willing to come forward and give us information about their businesses. Tonight, I'd like to welcome Chuck Nettinen. Is that correct, Chuck? Did I get it close? That's it. All right. From Three Stacks Brewing, welcome, and we're anxious to hear about your business and what's going on.
I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to introduce myself tonight. So my name's Chuck Nettinen. Are we on?
Push the button. Get the button on.
How's that?
Great.
Very good. My name's Chuck Netnin. I have the Three Stacks and a Rock Brewing Company up in North Morro Bay. So a little bit about my brewery. We're a small batch brewing company that brews, to be exact, 2 barrels at a time. So we have a very small footprint, and we're very craft. If you come into the brewing company and the tasting room, you'll find it's a very relaxed atmosphere. You can bring your friends, meet your family, experience some of the great beers that we have, and eat some pub food. Excuse me. Well, I want to basically reiterate that we are family friendly. So you're not gonna come into our tasting room and expect to get tanked. Although you can have a couple of beers, we want to make our brewing company your first stop and not your fourth or your fifth stop of the night, if you know what I mean. I also want to talk to you a little bit about traveling in brewing companies. So tourism in brewing companies, it's actually a lot of travelers. They're gearing their entire vacations around visiting places that have brewing companies, and they want to go and try craft beer. Actually, it's so prolific that they've coined the term beercation. It's a true thing. So Travelocity did a study where they interviewed 1,003 travelers, and it turns out that more than 75% of travelers preferred going to places that have craft beer and where they can try local beer. It's just an important thing, and it's growing by the numbers. And Three Stacks and a Rock Brewing Company is the only brewing company that's actually actively brewing beer in Morro Bay. And I think that every great city has a staple brewery, and we're going to fill those shoes. That's it.
Your hours of operation.
Oh, we are open on weekends. We open at noon to 9, and we're obviously open for lunch. On the weekdays, we open at 4 to 9, and we are closed on Tuesday because I gotta brew the beer. And
Okay.
the address is 3118 Main Street.
Great, and it's beercation, all one word? I just wanted to get that. I mean, that's a new term.
That's the way I read it. It was all one word.
It's not hyphenated. Okay,
No.
great, perfect.
Beercation.
Well, Chuck, thanks for being here. Look forward to coming back to your place again, and appreciate your willingness to come tonight. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to add that Three Stacks is also dog-friendly.
Yeah,
There you go.
we built a patio specifically for dogs. So bring your
Great.
friends.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much. With that, I will open it up to general public comment. Members of the audience wishing to address the council on city business matters not on the agenda may do so at this time. For those desiring to speak on items on the agenda but unable to stay for that item, you may address the council at this time as well. I'm going to start with the slips, and then I'll, again, as I said, open it up to anybody that doesn't want to fill out a slip or wants to remain anonymous, or maybe wants to give your name and not fill out a slip. So let's start with, and my apologies if I get the name wrong. I'm going to apologize, get clarification, and fix it next time. Diane Cogdell, up front. Diane, welcome. By the way, one more piece of information. There is this thing that's a green, yellow, red light that I just don't really like. We're trying to get a timer installed in the podium so that you can actually see how much time you have, which would make it much easier for all of us who give public comment. Hopefully that will be coming soon, but for now we do have this system that we're using, and when the red light goes off, what I'll do is allow you 10 more seconds just to wrap it up, so just so that you know that. Welcome, Diane, good to have you.
Thank you. My name is Diane Cogdell, Morro Bay, Surf Street. Not afraid to tell you my name. All right, I'm here to discuss. Oh,
Microphone there on your right, I think.
okay. Now we can talk. Okay, I'm here to talk about the historical Surf Street stairs that are no more. Now we felt kind of like a distant cousin at Christmas, where you have to invite to Christmas dinner to keep the peace. But after the dinner, you're gone. We've watched Highlands and Dorn stairs be rebuilt, and they're beautiful. And then later on in the years, they got those little slip things for the stairs so the public would have more safety on them. And what did our stairs get? Zippo, nada, nothing. So let's see where I'm at here. And then, in the history of Morro Bay, at some time, a decision was made to let our stairs die. And it wasn't a pretty death, was it? We have stood since the 1940s to get the troops down to the Embarcadero. And when you would pay attention and we needed a stair repaired, we would get our stair repaired. But the city wouldn't even repair it with screws. We got nails. So when the people went down, the nails came up in the back. When people went up, the nails came up in the front. So then in about a week, it kind of rocked. Okay, here we go. Now, we did have a laugh out loud moment, though. When we got the yellow sign that everybody got on their stairs, please hold on to the rail for your safety. We didn't dare, because we would have got splinters. So, I want to know, I must have missed it when you did a survey in the neighborhood and what that survey encompassed on how many people use the stairs. We use them a lot. The high school used them. Their team ran down the street. I understand the police department for PT would use the stairs to get down into the Embarcadero. Okay. Then I'm sure you thought ahead about demolishing the stairs, and you thought, well, maybe we should take account, or maybe the 4th of July or the Avocado Festival, and see how many people use those stairs to traverse down to the Embarcadero. So I'd like to know what the count was when you did that. I'd like to know who took the survey in the neighborhood.
Give you 10
And
more
what were the
seconds, Barbara.
results?
10 more seconds.
Okay. What we're asking the City Council for is for you to champion us to get replacement stairs, because we were told that there's no money for them.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Next up is Robert Cogdell. Robert, welcome.
That was the other half there.
You say better half?
We bought our house on Surf Street here, just 2 minutes up the road, because of the stairs. We love to walk. We park our vehicle. We hardly drive anywhere, and we would use the stairs every day, just all the time. And we were out of town when they tore them down. We just couldn't believe that it had happened. But and that probably no money was set aside for repair or rebuild the stairs. So we're trying to talk to our neighbors and get them all fired up about getting some stairs. Now my other item here is I put in last year, probably 10 months ago maybe, a crosswalk request to get across from the Maritime Museum to the restaurants on the Embarcadero there. You only have two choices. You walk way back to Beach Street, or you walk to the end of the power plant to find a crosswalk. You allow people to park in front of the power plant. There's no sidewalks there. They jaywalk to get to the restaurants. and the city knows this. And so we're hoping that I check on it once in a while, but they tell me that it's still in the computer, the request, but it doesn't tell me what's going on. So I would like to know what the status is of the crosswalk. And we think it's a very important issue, and we're hoping we'll get both these items settled. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Cogdill. Next up is Larry Truesdale. Welcome, Larry.
Good evening, council and city staff. I'm Larry Truesdale, and I'm a resident of Morro Bay. I'm proud of it. I want to address one of the roles the council will be responsible to address in the coming years, beginning from the 1st of this past January, 2019, regarding cannabis, whose use is now legal throughout the state. I believe this is particularly important since at least 2 members of the council accepted thousands of dollars from the cannabis industry to support their election. Presumably this means that they should have to recuse themselves from participating in regulatory decisions here in Morro Bay with the donor's company. I am providing each of you with a peer-reviewed article from the January issue of The Scientist magazine. It is nothing like the government propaganda from the 30s and 40s trying to discourage the use of marijuana. It reports on the latest research results, preliminary as they might be, regarding the consequences of cannabinoid exposure in utero through infancy and into adulthood. This is important for all adults to understand, since the use of marijuana is legal throughout the state. The City of Morro Bay has the discretionary right to manage the growth and sale of marijuana within city limits and has done so this past December. The use of edibles, be they raw marijuana or extracts, is particularly disturbing. The article points out the long residence time these materials have in the body compared to more commonly used drugs such as alcohol or nicotine, and the consequences to neonates and infants. This is best exemplified in the discussion on nursing infants and the extraordinary precautions a mother who consumes cannabis by any route must take to protect her child. The early results are so compelling that over time they will only become stronger, and the impact on teenagers and adults firmly established. This non-adult segment of the population should not be exposed to or have any access to edibles, and I would also suggest that edibles should not be allowed in any restaurant in the city limits, no matter if the specific foods are posted as such or not. Any tax revenues that the city must forego by adopting these practices is a price we need to pay to protect our future generations from the harm they could suffer before they are old enough to accept such risks. The data used in these studies show that a large number of young people in both the United States and Europe are already suffering irreversible damage. I have submitted the article to each member on the council and would encourage you to read it. If you're intimidated by some of the abbreviations,
10 more
please
seconds,
to the
Larry.
end, skip to the end, and you will be able to see the conclusions, and the tables are very clear. Thank you for listening.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Next up, I have Carol Truesdale. Welcome, Carol.
Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome our new council members. And I probably sound like Kermit the Frog, so I apologize for that. I'm Carol Truesdale. I've been here since 1995, and I want to go on record that I've done a lot of reading last year as far as sewer. I learned more about poop than I want to know about. But I also did some research because of the similarities to the Los Osos experience for our current WRF project. The cost of the Los Osos sewer plant nearly doubled in less than 5 years. The Coalition of the Labor, Agriculture, and Business of San Luis Obispo County, COLAB, report for the week of December 15th, 21st, 2013 included this statement. Item 23, more Los Osos sewer cost overruns and project creep. Water recycling facility sewer treatment plant. The budget for the design and construction of the plant is $36 million. Earlier this year, staff reported to the board that the engineer's estimates for the plant had grown to $46 million as the county prepared to go bid. The final cost of the plant was $71,257,000, nearly double the $36 million budgeted. The current cost estimate for the Morro Bay WRF is $126 million. Of that, $67,234,512 is covered by the City of Morro Bay's design and construction contract with Black & Veatch, approved by the City Council on October 23, 2018. A staff report on the contract contains this statement. Black & Veatch will complete all work under the contract and be compensated for their actual costs plus their overhead and profit cost plus basis up to the guaranteed not to exceed cost of $67,234,512. While staff does not anticipate cost exceeding the maximum contract amount, should that occur, a prior authorization by the council in the form of a contract amendment be required. I'm concerned about this. In other words, there's no limit on the amount of money that the city can pay the contractor, since the only thing required to pay more would be a council approval. We just approved last year $16+ million to Carollo. Clearly, with the city agreeing to contract terms like that, the cost of the wharf could easily double in the next 5 years or less and could easily end up totaling $252 million. I have concerns about escalating cost of this project. Thank you for hearing me. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Carol. Next up is Rigmore. Welcome, Rigmore.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and staff. My name is Rigmore. I live here in Morro Bay, and this is my friend Debbie. She don't want to talk.
I just support.
Welcome, Debbie.
Although I'm angry today, I will welcome you to the new year and hope that you will do what is right for our city. Which leads me to the issue around the Surf Street stairs right outside here at the Vets Hall. The stairs you sneakingly and without any public notice arbitrarily tore down right before Christmas. First, I could not quite believe it and came down here every morning expecting some construction either for new stairs or maybe an interesting San Francisco Lombard Street trail or some other idea, but saw nothing. I figure you have some baloney excuse like they have passed their time, need new boards, we have no funding, etc. Yes, and that is because you never properly maintain them. Even as far back as the 80s, in the Beach Street specific plan, the Surf Street stairs were mentioned and even a public overlook was promised. Read page 29 on your Beach Street over an existing stairway at the end of Surf Street, blah, blah, blah. Allow access for pedestrians from the bluff top to the Embarcadero. It also talks about the spectacular view, etc., etc. The deck plan on page 31 and the cost, etc., on page 40. All this was promised so the bluff owners would not have a walkway in front of their houses on the bluff. So for the public, no wonder I can't read. Sorry. So the public, to enjoy the view, would not have to go in front of their houses. Well, we never got a view deck, and now we do not even have stairs. What are you going to decide when the stairs from the bluff at North Point down to the Dog Beach needs repairs? Are you just going to tear them down? This is just not right. The Surf Street stairs have been there since the 40s. They are historic, unique, different, and used every day, all through the year, both by people from Morro Bay, groups like the fire department for exercising, city staff, and lots of visitors and vacationers. You all up there do not live around here, so the ridiculousness of tearing those stairs down may not be so obvious to you.
Give you 10
but
seconds.
you have voted in to do the right thing. And I got another few things that I'll talk about later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rigmore. Appreciate it. Next up for public comment is Erica Crawford. Welcome, Erica.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council, and staff. My name is Erica Crawford. I'm with the Morro Bay Chamber of Commerce. Our Morro Bay Chamber is a 501c6 nonprofit organization that represents 300, it's the collective voice of 300 businesses and 3,700 jobs. Our board of directors, our chamber staff, and I want to extend you a warm welcome as the new council for the City of Morro Bay. We look forward to working and continuing the hard and strategic work of economic development with you, working always with an eye towards supporting an opportunity economy that is resilient and diversified, that's filled with entrepreneurs and employers, and a robust workforce that is trained and ready to fill jobs, the jobs of both of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I wanted to make just a couple of quick announcements. Our 4MB focus group is in the Downtown Economic Center this month. We're meeting tomorrow at Haven Realty at 8:30 a.m. Our city manager, community development director, Councilmember McPherson, Morro Bay PD will be there. All to discuss current topics of concern and opportunity in the downtown with the business community. We will definitely be diving into the tree lighting tomorrow morning, in addition to conversations that are continuing about wayfinding signage. As many of you and the community know or should know, the Chamber, the Lions Club, Morro Bay and Bloom, and Morro Bay Rotary came together to request funding from TBID to light the downtown trees, and we were successfully granted close to $17,000 to complete that project. We, the Chamber, and the collective is working in close concert with the city staff to get feedback on lighting styles. If you drive down, there's a style over in front of the Bay Theater, and then there's a style in front of ASAP. Feedback to date has been really pretty 50-50. So some of the questions to keep in mind is, something to think about is that this is a year-round lighting installation. Is this for decorative lighting? Is this for public safety? Is this to light storefronts? How difficult will the ultimate selection be to maintain? So we do want and need to hear more from you, but we also do want and need to move forward soon. The last announcement, it is with great pride that I wanted to announce to the community the award recipients to be publicly acknowledged this Friday at the dinner. Thank you, Mayor Heading, for mentioning the dinner. We have 5 tickets left.
5 tickets left.
Just about. We could probably squeeze in a few more if you guys really want to come. But I'm very proud. So the 2018 honorees are the Student Citizen of the Year is a young woman called Annalise Dempsey. The Citizen of the Year has been named as Joan Solu. Business of the Year is Kitzman Culligan Water. And our Living Treasure is Gordon Liu of Coffee Pot Restaurant. So please do congratulate these outstanding citizens for recognition that's so well deserved. And thank you and welcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Erica. Appreciate it. Next up for public comment, I have Todd Gailey. Welcome, Todd.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Todd Gailey, current resident of SLO, but longtime resident of Morro Bay. I'm here to talk to you about my recent termination. With over 20 years of service in the fire department, with over 16 of those years served here in Morro Bay. As the senior fire captain paramedic, I was just recently terminated. You'll be privy to those documents. I'd like to sit down with each one of you. But I want the community to know what's going on in the city, and it's your job to oversee the city staff and their decisions. And it's ultimately your authority to reinstate me. And that's what I'm here for. I don't hold hardships. I believe wrong decisions were made. But I've been here risking my life and serving the community to the best of my ability. I'm not perfect. I don't think anyone in the fire service or anyone in this world is. But we do our best. And after 16 years of working for the city with no disciplinary history ever in my employee history, and with only 5 evaluations that are required by the city to be annual evaluations. I'm only 5 evaluations in the last 12 years. Okay, and the city just fired me, and the cause for termination was for directing my crew to rescue a seagull from a residential power line. There were 2 other items noted, deemed for suspension, and that was hiking to get a drone battery off Morro Rock and running a meeting incorrectly according the post-incident analysis following the seagull rescue. So literally, I rescued a seagull. We're about to talk about the bird festival, and your senior fire captain got fired. Okay, I'm here to serve the community to the best of my ability. I want my job back. I don't hold grudges, and I think that the city made mistakes in my case. I'd like to make the public aware of them. I'd like to make you aware of them. I don't think that hiring an investigator who spent nearly half his career with our fire chief and who's a personal friend from Tascadero of our fire chief is going to give you an unbiased opinion of any investigation. I think that was a large mistake by the city. I think there were several other mistakes, including documenting that I operated an aerial ladder incorrectly. We're the only department in this county that has an aerial ladder and does not have an operational policy. Why am I a fire captain and the only one in this county to not have a policy to follow, but then I was fired for not following direction on that ladder? I've got a lot more stuff for you guys. I just want you to know I'd like my job back. I want to serve this community to the best of my ability. And I've been doing that, and
Give
I
you
want
10
to thank
seconds,
you.
Todd. Thank you.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Next up for public comment is Tim Gailey. Welcome, Tim.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time. I'd like to thank you each for your service. And Tim Gailey, I live on Orchid Street, North Morro Bay. And I'm sorry to be here under these circumstances. I strongly disagree with the city's decision to terminate a fire captain. I've been a fire captain, and I've been a firefighter for over 21 years now, and I've never seen anything like this happen. I'm almost sad to be a resident of Morro Bay and be a part of this. I strongly disagree with the city's decision to terminate. He was given 3 reasons, as he said. One was taking a drone off the rock that was causing unnecessary calls, 911 calls that were not needed. Another one was rescuing a seagull out of a power drop. So the power drop is where lines come into the house. There was a seagull there, and a resident was complaining the seagull was alive and flopping. He made the decision to take the seagull, the bird, out of there, save the bird, and that was probably the wrong decision. If I was there, I don't think I would have made that decision. I think I would have said, no, I'm calling PG&E. I'm going to wait until they get there and shut down the lines. But in all reality, the seagull was alive. The seagull was flopping around, and he made the decision to save the seagull. If the seagull was under some huge, electrical hazard, the seagull would be dead already. So they didn't touch the power lines. They grabbed the seagull. They took it down. I think that was the wrong decision, but I've made lots of wrong decisions in my career as a fire captain. I'm sure your police sergeants have too. I think as leaders, we have to train our employees and we have to give them corrective counseling. We have to follow the progressive discipline policy that's laid forth in the civil service rules. I think all of our employees deserve to be counseled, trained. If they continue to have those bad habits and are poor leaders, then they should be suspended, sometimes without pay. And if that still doesn't work, then I believe they should be demoted and they should go to a lower rank. And we should continue training them, especially our fire captains, our firefighters, our police officers, our harbor patrol officers. They deserve our utmost respect, and we should give them the best training. Never should we just go straight to termination. I believe that's completely unfair and unbiased, unwarranted in this occasion. I urge you, the City Council, just to take the time to investigate this case and move forward with this employee, because this is a big deal to the fire department and to the community. I thank you for your time and for your service to the community.
Thank you. Next up is Barbara Spagnola. Welcome back.
Thank you. Barbara Spagnola. I wanted to speak, resident of Morro Bay, I wanted to speak briefly on the application and selection process for the advisory board committees that are upcoming, as Mr. Heller mentioned. And just for full disclosure, I am serving on 2 of those committees. I will be a candidate for an upcoming appointment. But I'm speaking as a citizen, and I'm speaking one of the committees I've served since 2010, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from people after they leave or their term expires. So some of these thoughts I'm just making as suggestions to help you to ensure that we get the best candidates for each of the advisory boards. And the first thing I'd like to say is that if you can please reiterate during the interview process what's expected of them and time commitments for each of the various boards. They all vary somewhat. But I notice on a couple of the boards, we have applicants or some openings with different termination and end dates. So perhaps when you do the selection process, you vote, or however you do the selection process, for each opening one at a time. In the past, I've seen sometimes we try to nominate 2, 3, 4 people at once, and then we start thinking about what the term is, and the candidates are trying to figure out who's serving till 2020 or 22, whatever. So you may want to think through that process now while you have time. So that's one suggestion. The second suggestion is, in some cases, unfortunately, we don't have enough qualified applicants, or we don't even have enough applicants, period, and you don't really know who's qualified, I suppose, till you interview them. But that being the case, then I would just leave those positions open. We've operated on some of the committees with less than a full number of members, and that may be easier than selecting somebody that's not qualified and then decides to leave shortly afterwards because the assignment wasn't what they anticipated. So that's the second suggestion. If there's not enough, you have to make a hard decision and not appoint a full cadre of candidates. And then conversely, I'd like you to consider, in some cases, we're fortunate to have an abundance of applicants, all of whom are qualified. And if that being the case, I would like to request that you maybe follow the model of the county grand jury on civil investigations, where you appoint an alternate for maybe a short period of time, or if the candidates are willing to serve as an alternate, that would be valid maybe for 3, 4, 6 months, so that we don't have to reopen the entire process again after a committee gets started and then some other member has, either a family situation or emergency or move or something like that. So in summary, what I'm saying is, number 1, make sure they understand. Number 2, don't vote if we don't have qualified. Number 3, consider some kind of alternate mechanism. I'm sure your staff can advise you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. That's the last speaker slip, Madam Clerk, unless you have others. I'll open it up. Anybody else? Come forward. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Bast. I'm a 40-year resident of this wonderful town.
Welcome, Nancy.
And thank you, Mayor Heading, for 86ing the speaking slips. It was clear during the election campaign that the candidates were divided into opposing viewpoint camps regarding the main election issue of siting the WRF at the South Bay Boulevard site. Although the winning viewpoint, your side, Mayor Heading, won by just about 200 votes, one candidate was elected from your opposition, and that is Councilman Heller. Council members are given many subcommittee assignments. Especially important are those within the council that determine the nuts and bolts issues directly affecting Morro Bay and its residents. You, as mayor, arbitrarily chose who will be on those committees. Of the 11 subcommittees that propose city policy on vacation rentals, cannabis regulations, economic development strategy, the Chevron property, the aquarium property, the power plant property, the wind power project, etc., You have assigned yourself 7 of these. Councilman Davis, also 7. Councilmember McPherson, 6. New Councilmember Addis, 4. And new Councilmember Heller, 0. Of 8 advisory board liaison assignments, you assign Councilman Heller to sit in to monitor only the WharfCAC board, a board that seldom meets, and most significantly, you have taken away the WharfCAC's ability to consider the costs of the project and assign those to the Financial Advisory Board, none of whom have engineering and/or construction experience. In doing so, you have made the WharfCAC and Councilman Heller's attendance superfluous. Thus, a significant, possibly the largest number of residents have been excluded from having any representation in the governing of this city. Once again, a monopoly of decision makers will decide the quality of life-changing issues for the residents. It seems mending differences within the community sounds good, but in reality, does not bode well for equality of viewpoints during this council's tenure. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
Hello there, I'm Chris Cameron, and I brought a prop.
You did.
Welcome Mayor, Council, and staff. This is I'm Chris Cameron, 38-year resident from this area. And the prop is a Harris hawk because we're talking about the Morro Bay Bird Festival. And there were just some really serious city issues discussed, but we're talking about birds and beer. Apparently, those are the items for ecotourism in this area. So after you have some beer, then you can come to the Bird Festival. Between 500 and 600 people have been coming to this Bird Festival for over 20 years, and this Bird Festival was established as an ecotourism event to support the city of Morro Bay. And we do that by bringing lots of people in on a shorter winter weekend where there's less tourism, and to get a lot of people in enjoying the hotels and restaurants and the birds in our area. About birds, I don't know if you know, but every year there's a winter bird count. And Morro Bay, this last month, there were over 200 species, not individuals, but different varieties, different species of birds that were seen in this area, which makes this one of the top birding areas in the whole nation. And so people who love birds and love to watch birds are usually retired, they have some money, and they like to travel, and they like to come, stay in a hotel, go to a restaurant, and look at birds. So that's what we do for the city, and we're glad that we can do that. Thank you for the grant that you gave us to help with that. And are there any questions? We hope that all of you council members will come to the Friday evening reception at the Morro Bay Community Center. And then on Saturday, Dr. Heading, if you would come and say a few words at the Los Osos Community Center, because we're looking for places where we can get 400 or 500 people, and we don't have that many spaces in Morro Bay to do that. So it's going to be in Morro Bay, in Los Osos on Saturday night. Also on Sunday night, we have keynote speakers. Any questions about the birds and the Bird Festival?
Thank you, Chris. I'll be there.
Thank you. On another note, on a totally different note, I just want to stand in support of Todd Gailey. I've known him since he was a child, and my life has been in his hands, and his life has been in my hands. Several times I would again put my life in his hands. He is ultimately safe, and he's a good guy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ooh, flapping wings. Still, public comment is open if anybody would like to come forward. I do see an individual coming forward.
My name is Betty Winholtz.
Welcome, Betty.
I would like to reiterate input, the man that came and talked about his beer business, the 3 stacks that I have been there, and he forgot to mention that the goodies that they make to go with the beer are quite tasty and inventive. So I encourage you to go there for food as well as beer. I have used the staircase many a times. You know, residents don't have to live in this neighborhood to use those stairs, and I use them on my dog walks all the time, and we were quite shocked when we couldn't get down the cliff. I want to honor the firefighter who spoke and his bravery for coming and airing his items, and know that the council will hopefully do the right thing. And I would like to refer back to Ms. Spagnola's comments about selections for committees. Having been in your shoes, my philosophy was there is no one that's a resident of Morro Bay who is not qualified. The point of being on an advisory committee is that you are a resident and that you're here to do the best. Now, you haven't chosen the right committee to apply for, and it may not be the understanding that you had, and for that reason, they may want to change what they apply for. But I don't know anyone that is not qualified who is a resident of Morro Bay to be on the committee. The real reason I'm up here at this point in time is to say that I'm very anxious to embrace this new council. I'm anxious for this new change, and part of the reason I am is because 2 of you have declared yourself almost to a higher standard, hopefully, than what has been in the past. And one of those is the mayor, as a member of the Rotary, that he has, as a member, said that he will abide by 4 principles. And those 4 principles are truth-telling, is it fair, will it build goodwill and better friendships, and is it beneficial to all concerned? And based on those 4 principles, I'm going to let the mayor know that I will be watching and hopefully seeing that he abides by those principles. And then, of course, the other person is Councilmember Addis, who helped found the Women's March, as she mentioned earlier in the evening, and where she talks about truth to power. And I'm here to say that I have attended those marches, and I believe in those items too. And part of the mission statement of that is to protect the rights of human rights, not just women's rights, but human rights, which is all us residents, and that you do that towards a just future, working as in a unity with communities, and that it includes that the document of your mission statement is inclusion without inequity, so there's equity for all. So justice is a mainstay of that, and so I'm going to look for that. And before I sit down, could you please turn the heat on?
Thank you, Betty. We get some heat in here. Oh, here comes some heat.
Good evening, Steve Stevens. I wanted to also...
Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. I wanted to welcome the new council. I also am appreciative of some of the statements that have been made, and I hope they manifest itself in a manner that there will be respect for citizens' viewpoints. I especially want to embrace the concept of appointments of people out here, the citizens that have affirmative, that choose not to be affirmative relative to city positions. And I think frequently what we find is that through those that offer differing opinions, certainly improvements take place in terms of proposals that are out there. So I'd like to see dissentant voices on committees. I think that one of the problems, frankly, from the previous council is that we were looking at too many affirmative kind of approaches relative to positions that the council held, and too frequently we see that the city staff seems to simply affirm positions, again, that the city council holds. So I'm a big favor, I'm very much in favor of thinking that a descendant viewpoint can ultimately end up with a better product. And just lastly, in that main vein that I spoke about previously, I'd love to see a position of an ombudsperson that might offer, again, a countering viewpoint to what the council might offer. I think it would be very, very helpful, and I certainly think there are citizens out here that could fulfill that position in a very nonpartisan way, but at least to offer a descendant viewpoint. So I appreciate it, and good luck.
Thank you. Any other public comment before we move forward? Seeing none. Coming forward, sir, in the back. Public comment before I close it? Anybody? Yes, ma'am. You don't have to run. It's okay.
I wasn't sure when to come.
Come on down.
All right. Good evening, Council. Judith Johnston, 2590 Elm Avenue.
Welcome, Judith.
Family home for the last 40 years. And we were in response to the appeal that we had in October. And I was hoping that you were privy to the last appeal, the history in there, and all of the facts from that thing. If not, I think it's important, because I want to go through it, that we had...
Are you addressing item B1 at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Am I to wait till later?
No, if you are going to be here then and would like to make comments then, that would be appropriate.
Okay.
But certainly you can do it now if you need to.
Yes, I can do it whenever it's appropriate.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Still surveying the crowd, looking for that last person to come forward. Looks like we have none. With that, I will close public comment and bring it back to council. Going to ask the appropriate folks to address some of the issues that I have taken down. I think I'll start with the number one issue, and that is the Surf Street stair removal. And if Mr. Collins, you might direct staff to respond to the concerns raised by a number of people about that and the action that was taken.
I'll let Public Works Director Rob Leivik start it off, and we may turn to the city clerk as well to fill in some blanks.
Great. Mr. Leivik?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Yes, the Surf Street stairs were removed. For the few that don't know that, maybe at home.
Can't hear you, your mic.
The Surf Street stairs were removed. We posted the site on November 30th with physical postings at the stair. We used Facebook, Nextdoor, the city website, so that a few days ahead of time to notice their removal. They were removed because quite frankly, they were in such a state of disrepair. Our advice from our insurance provider said to remove them immediately. So we did just that. Last year's budget did include an item for the replacement of the stairs. Unfortunately, we just can't build in these times a set of wooden stairs that go directly up the bluff top. We need to accommodate all users, which includes those that may not be able to navigate those stairs as easily as others. So it will require to build a ramp system to get up the bluff, which is feasible but expensive. So probably in the neighborhood of several $100,000 to build those stairs. We'll be looking for potential alternative transportation grant funds, although this year the county was completely unsuccessful in any Caltrans grant for alternative transportation projects. But that won't stop us from applying. There are other sources, such as the general fund, come through budget time. We can start the process with design and keep the project moving forward. It's always good to have those shovel-ready projects available for when money does appear. As we found out with our Morrow Creek Bridge project, we had a project ready to build. Some byways money was available and another project in the county couldn't be ready to be built, we were able to snag that money, so to continue to move forward. I was a stair user, Surf Street stair user. Didn't like to see them go, but we do have alternative access in the time being. We have Beach Street, which has a sidewalk down there. And then the lower portion where it gets a little steep, there's a handrail on the side of Beach, which is metal, so you won't suffer those same splinters you would have on the Surf Street stairs. But like I said, they were removed because of their condition, and they were beyond the point where even screwing boards to them was going to make any difference. The two other staircases mentioned that had some repair work done. The one at Tidelands, the one at Centennial Stairway had replacement handrails installed just recently. Those are made from heavier timbers. They're not rotting. We can repair work and not make those ADA upgrades, but to make a replacement, we need to accommodate all users. I don't know if the clerk has anything to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Levick. Appreciate that. Also, Mr. Collins, if you could address the process that you're utilizing for making decisions on the two approved medical cannabis dispensaries. Mr. Truesdale brought up an issue about council recusing themselves, and I just want maybe the community to understand the process and who it involves.
Sure, I'll give it a shot, and our community development director, Scott Graham, may be able to fill in the blanks. Ultimately, council did approve two permits, or the ability to permit two cannabis retail outfits for medical use only at this time. Currently, we've received upwards of 7 applications. Those were pretty hefty. Each one of them came with a $19,000 deposit. It might be actually a little bit higher than that. We have an outside consultant that specializes in this significant review. We're talking about stacks upon stacks of paper, very complicated in order to get it right. So they're doing the first set of review, which is very extensive, and then that'll come back to the planning director. We'll then forward those on to our subcommittee, which includes the police chief, fire chief, and finance director. Clearly, they're looking at it from the vantage point of safety for the community. And then they will make recommendations to myself, and I'll make the final decision as is outlined in the ordinance adopted by City Council over a year ago.
And that does not have to come back to council.
That's
correct. You make the final decision with recommendations from your committee.
That's correct.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We also had questions regarding a termination at this time. Unfortunately, because of the fact that it's a human resources issue, the council would be unable to comment to any of you who have made statements, public comment regarding the termination that was noted. I'll ask our city attorney to reaffirm that maybe and outline any comments that he would have.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So essentially, there was a termination that was made public on December 4th of city personnel, and that is now an active appeal. So on the advice of legal counsel, the city council is advised to not weigh in right now because it's an active appeal, and it would potentially prejudice the process if the city council were to respond from the dais right now. So out of respect for the process, I appreciate the council not weighing in and responding to comments made, and certainly respect the right of the public and those involved to make public comment, though, however, at the meetings. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And then Mrs. Spagnola, thank you for your recommendations. I'm sure council would be willing to take into consideration suggestions as we move forward with advisory board decisions. And then Ms. Bast, thank you for your comments as well, directed at myself appropriately. We do have on the agenda, a consent agenda, the recommendations for not only county-wide committees or commissions, and those are per policy of the city, to be made by the mayor specifically. The remainder are recommendations, the subcommittees as well as the liaison positions. Those are recommendations that need to be affirmed by the council. So those are not decisions necessarily made by the mayor. Those are recommendations that will come to council and are on the agenda tonight. If any individual on the council, when I get to that agenda item, wishes to pull that and have discussion about those positions in the appointments, that would be certainly appropriate. Note, please, that I spent time with every council member, over an hour with each of them to discuss their desires. Many of them crossed over in their desires to be on certain committees, and in no way was I trying to limit the participation by any individual council member, whether new or older, or having been on council, to be involved in any kind of decision making. So again, once again, this is an agenda item, 2/3 of which will be discussed by the council if they so desire, and approved by the council. The only mayoral appointments that are absolute would be the county-wide commission. So thank you for bringing that forward. Also, I think maybe Ms. Winholtz also commented on that, possibly somebody else, but just wanted to follow through and make that comment. And let me see if there was anything else I needed to respond to.
There's one more from Mr. Leivik. That was the status of the crosswalk request from the Maritime Museum to the restaurants across the road.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. That is a mid-block crossing. It there's no intersection of two streets there, so it's mid-block. It goes from a driveway approach to a driveway approach through a concrete median island. Again, there are some accessibility issues with. It would be simple if we could just go out there and paint lines on the pavement. Unfortunately, we live in a world of many regulations, or fortunately, we live in a world of many regulations, depending on your perspective. And so there are other things that need to be done that currently we have not budgeted for, nor are there, there's some physical things. So we need to put an ADA ramp on either side. Now, the Maritime Museum side is a little bit easier. When we did those improvements there, we left room for that. On the restaurant side, it empties into a parking lot. There's a concrete median in the way. There's a fire hydrant in the way. It's rather expensive to do. It will be something that, should the council desire that, will move forward. And there's funding available.
Thank you, Mr. Leivik. Appreciate that. With that, any other items we missed, council, on comments? No? Looking both ways? Great. Okay. With that, we will move to the consent agenda, and I'll just ask if there are any items to be pulled. If not, I'll seek a motion for approval. Consent agenda. Any items to be pulled?
I want to pull item A2.
A2. Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item A4.
A4? Okay. Looking to my left. Right. And none. And I'll open it up to public comment as well for the items, the consent items on the agenda. Any public comment? Seeing none. Okay. Bring it back to council. And I have a motion for approval of the remainder items outside of A2 and A4.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember McPherson, second by Councilmember Davis. A roll call vote, please.
Councilmember McPherson?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Addis?
Aye.
Councilmember Heller?
Aye.
Mayor Heading, gosh.
Mayor Irons is no longer here. Aye.
The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Agenda item A2, A2.
Right, that's me.
Ms. McPherson?
Yes, I wanted to pull this item because there was one sentence in it that was not clear, and I just wanted to make sure that we clarify what was meant by it, and that was on page 12 of the minutes, and it concerned the subcommittee for the harbor lease policy. And the sentence reads, "There was also council consensus that subcommittee involvement was not necessary." And my understanding was that we were going to continue the subcommittee, but that the subcommittee was not going to attend the meetings of the working group. But it could be interpreted that we disbanded it. So I just think we should probably discuss and clarify that point so we can correct the minutes and make sure we understand what we meant.
It's my recollection that it was to continue, however, that there would not be direct attendance at the meetings. That's what I recall. Councilman Davis? Great.
Okay.
So,
all right.
With that, we'll seek correction.
Yes.
You want to voice the correction you'd like to have?
I could do that.
And make a motion for approval?
All right, I will.
Point of order. We had a constituent from the audience who wanted to speak on public comment, wasn't able to get your attention.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd opened for public comment and announced it, but come on up. Sorry. Thank you, Betty. Sorry I missed you.
Thank you, and I appreciate your wanting to follow the rule of law, and that's a good thing that's coming out of this council. And I apologize for interrupting this particular item, A2. I wanted to speak to A4.
Sure.
So should I go ahead and do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would reiterate what Ms. Bass said earlier about the balance on the committees, and I appreciate the fact that you reached out to the different council members to get their input, but it's very important to me that each council member receive equal duties and that they are equally participating in the different ways that we create policy before it's brought to the council. So I would encourage the whole council to shuffle A4 and make sure that it's evenly divided amongst yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other public comment? I was looking for hands again. Okay, again, that is closed. Go ahead, Councilmember McPherson.
Okay, well, I will make the motion that we use the following language. So we eliminate that sentence and say there was council consensus that the council subcommittee of Davis and McPherson would meet with Mr. Lomelli, who is the facilitator, and staff, but would not regularly attend meetings of the lease policy working group.
And I'll take that as a motion.
I did say it was a motion.
And is there a second? Second. Great. Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember McPherson?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
And Councilmember Addis?
Aye.
Councilmember Heller?
Aye.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0. Minutes to be amended with the statement provided by Councilmember McPherson.
Thank you. And agenda item A4, Councilmember Heller. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the support by the community and helping with me with this new job that I have. I'm not really quite up to speed yet. I want to say that I did have a very cordial and respectful hour meeting with Mayor Heading. We had a very good conversation. I expressed the committees and the interests that I have here in the city. I also expressed to him that I have some business interests in Southern California that I want to try and keep going if I can. It may have something to do with some of the assignments, I'm not sure. But there was no ill will in terms of the mayor's assignments, in my opinion. But having looked at the score and the breakdown from those of you who know more about these committees than I do, it does seem a little bit unbalanced, and I would like to I pulled this item because I would like to sit with the mayor and readjust the assignments so that I have approximately the same amount of responsibility and committee assignments as our new council member Addis. So I thank you again for clarifying those things for me, and hang with me. Pretty soon I'll understand all this stuff. Thanks.
Sure, certainly. Any discussion, other input on Councilmember Heller's concern? Councilmember Heller, would you like to make a motion?
How do I do that?
You would say simply, I would like to move that, and then what you had requested happen.
Okay. I would like to move that we pull this item and that I sit with Mayor Heading and we discuss assignments, committee assignments.
And not approve these at this time.
And not approve these at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Trying to help you out there. Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the table, and I will open it up for discussion.
I would just like to say that could we separate out the regional boards, or were you also considering those as part of what you're interested in? I guess that's a question.
I'm considering all of those. Yeah.
All of them?
Yeah.
Any other comments to make at this time?
When you say regional boards, is that the county assignments that the mayor made?
Which are the mayor's prerogative.
Yeah.
I guess my concern is that two of those boards meet tomorrow, and they need to have representation. And I'm prepared to represent the city on the SLOCOG board. So,
and I've given you my background and information, how decisions were made, and I stand by my appointments. Again, the mayoral appointments for county commissions are purview of the mayor. The ones really under consideration, and correct me, Mr. City Attorney, if indeed there are other considerations outside of those that should be discussed. In other words, should we separate these?
Certainly, the council could separate the three different lists here, and Mr. Mayor, you're correct that pursuant to city procedures, the first list for the county and regional boards are at the mayor's discretion, and the mayor makes those appointments. As for the city council liaison assignments and city council subcommittees, that is a decision made by the council as a whole.
Okay, then I'd like to withdraw my statement about the regional assignments.
Withdraw your original motion?
Yes.
I would like to move that we...
You want to withdraw your second?
Oh, yes, I'll withdraw my second.
Okay. And then I'll take any new motion that...
Well, I would move that we approve the appointments to the regional and county boards that are at the mayor's discretion.
second.
We have a motion by Councilmember McPherson, second by Councilmember Davis to approve the county-wide appointments as presented. Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. And now we'll have discussion again regarding the remainder of the appointments that are really city council considerations, not just mayoral appointments.
I would like to say that the couple of things, the WRF-CAC, Water Reclamation Facility Citizens Advisory Committee, is an important one to me. I'd like it to be a permanent committee. I think...
so we'll get to that when we get to discussion.
Okay.
If that, yeah,
Okay,
I want to
good.
stick to just the appointments for the existing committees, and then we'll...
That's fine.
Yeah, cool. Looking for a motion.
I will make Mr. Heller's motion that we allow him to meet with the mayor to consider changing the assignments so that he has more opportunity to participate.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
So, motion by Councilmember McPherson and second by Councilmember Davis. Any further discussion? Ready to vote? Okay, roll call vote.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes, and thank you, Marlis.
Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. That retires item A4, and I believe that's all I had for pulling. And let's move to, council, do we need a break for 5 minutes? Looking to you. Let's take a 5-minute break before we begin our public hearing item B. Thank you, and welcome back. We are on item B1, public hearing, and just for purposes of our new council members, I'm going to outline, and maybe us that have been on the council before, the process that we use for public hearings, just so that you're familiar with it. We'll take first the report from staff as presented and as they give it to us. Then there'll be questions from council to staff directly. So any questions that you may have for staff members, at that time we'll take those. Then I'll open the public hearing. I will ask the appellant to come up, and you'll have 10 minutes to present, and there'll be questions then from city council members directly to the appellant, and then 10 minutes for the respondent, and then questions from council members to the respondent. After that, I'll open up public comments, and again, you can fill out a speaker slip or not, whichever way you prefer, and you'll have 3 minutes or less if you prefer less. The opportunity for the appellant and the respondent to speak again will be at my discretion, and I'll be happy to open that up if you have further information you wish to respond to after that. I'll then close the public hearing, bring it back to council, and at that time, there'll be council debate and discussion. If you, council, want to hear from the appellant or respondent or the public again, then I'll reopen the hearing and close it down after any second look that you may want to have. We'll conclude with a motion and move forward with that motion as it turns out. So just for our own edification and for the public, that's the process. This is item B1, and I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor Heading. Council, before you this evening, people of Coastal
Can't hear, Scott, I'm sorry, you've got people in the back.
Apparently, no one thought it was coming. How's that? All right, there we go. This evening you have before you an appeal of Coastal Development Permit CP0575. That's at 2575 Greenwood. The lot fronts on Greenwood Street and then backs up to the dead end of Pico. You can sort of see it there on the map. The appellants are Kay Milligan and Judy Johnston, and the applicants are Dan and Dina Kroll. The project consists of the demolition of a shed that faces on the Pico side of the lot, the conversion of the existing garage to a 386 square foot accessory dwelling unit. They will replace one of the parking spaces that's in the garage and put it adjacent to the garage in the area where the shed is being removed. I'll show you a site plan in a minute that identifies that. And then one of the parking spaces will be relocated on Greenwood. And then there will be an addition of a traffic barrier at the end of Pico that will have a sign on it that says no parking at the end of there. This is the site plan and a picture of the rear portion of the 2575 Greenwood property. You can see in that picture the shed to the left is the portion that will be removed, and that'll be where one of the parking spaces gets relocated. And the garage door that you see there, that garage will be converted to the accessory dwelling unit. You can see in the site plan to the right of that, the gray area is the area of the ADU or the garage, and then again adjacent to that is where one of the parking spaces will go. And you can also see on the Greenwood side, which is to the right, the rectangle towards the top of the site plan there is the area where we will be relocating the second parking space. A little history for the site. On August 6th of 2018, city staff approved an administrative coastal development permit for the project. On August 15th, that approval was appealed to the Planning Commission. On October 16th, the Planning Commission heard the appeal and denied it, upholding staff's decision for the approval. And then the appellant subsequently appealed the Planning Commission's decision to the City Council, and here we sit this evening reviewing the appeal. The Planning Commission's action, they did make one minor adjustment to the project, and that was an amendment of Public Works Condition number 3, which is the condition that requires the placement of a no parking sign across that Pico frontage, and that was to add in the vehicle code sections that are relevant to the no parking statement. So that would be added in where the Planning Commission or the City Council to uphold the Planning Commission's decision. There's really one appeal issue related to access and parking and safety. What you see is, again, the rear portion of the home facing Pico there, and a couple of cars parked in the driveway. That is the dead-end portion of Pico, and cars parked in that alignment would serve to block access to driveways on the properties on either side of Pico, which is the main reason behind the appeal. The appeal statement, and it's in your staff report, it says, parked cars continue to block neighboring property driveways on Pico. The appellants request that a fence be installed across the entirety of the real property line, the rear property, which would prohibit access to the relocated parking space where the shed is to be removed on Pico. I have a staff response to the request by the appellants, and that is that Condition 7 requires the existing driveway approach to be removed. We have a fencing requirement that goes on there along with the metal barricade that says it's a dead-end street and no parking is allowed. The project, as approved and as it sits before you this evening, is consistent with the city's general plan and local coastal program, the zoning ordinance, and state accessory dwelling unit law. The appellant raises no substantial issue as it relates to any of those documents or any of the policies therein, and staff is recommending that the City Council uphold the Planning Commission's denial of the Director's approval of conditional use permit 575 for the conversion of the garage to an accessory dwelling unit. And I will end my presentation there and take any questions that the Council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Council members, any questions of Mr. Graham?
I have questions.
Councilmember McPherson, start us off, please.
Since everybody else is so silent. Well, first I do have to say that I did meet with both the appellants and the respondent, primarily because I wanted to see what it looked like, and I did hear both sides of the story. I also met twice with Scott, just so that I fully understood what was before us. So my questions. Scott, could you just very briefly tell us what the requirements are for an accessory dwelling unit, and specifically, are there parking requirements that go along with that? Is there size requirements? Anything that might pertain to this hearing?
Accessory dwelling unit law changed about a year ago, January 1, 2018, and in doing so, it doesn't require any parking for accessory dwelling units if they're located within a half mile of a transit stop. As the case may be, in the city, you're going to be within a half mile of a transit stop pretty much anywhere you are, so there's probably not going to be, unless they want to provide them on their own, any requirement to provide parking for accessory dwelling units, and that's state law, so we have to comply with that.
Okay.
Oh, and sorry, second part of your question was size limitations. There is a size limitation related to the existing unit. It can't exceed 50% of the existing square footage of the unit.
So this application meets all of the requirements?
Correct.
Okay. And could you describe the barrier that's going to be placed at the, there's both a barrier and a fence, and could you make a distinction between the barrier and the fence, and just help us to understand that better?
Well, so I showed you the picture, I can't bring it back up because it undid itself. Anyway, so across the rear on Pico, you had the garage door, and you saw that. So the garage door is going to go away. They're going to convert that to an accessory dwelling unit, and they're going to locate a fence, probably 5 or 6 feet across the back of the property. And then on the right-of-way side, the street side of Pico, they're going to put a metal beam barrier post at the end of the street. It'll have a no parking sign mounted on it that I discussed earlier, and so that's what it'll look like. It'll extend across the portion of it in front of the portion of the lot in front of the accessory dwelling unit, stopping where the driveway access would go to the outside parking space that's going to go into the location where the shed was located.
And there's also an unpaved area on Pico Street that is also the source of some of the parking issues, I understand. Could you tell me what that is, and is parking allowed there? Is that permissible there?
Sure. I don't have a picture of it. If I did, I'd show it to you. On Pico Street, there is like many streets in town, there is a large area of unimproved right-of-way there, meaning there's right-of-way there where you would normally have a road or sidewalk improvements. There is no road there that's paved, and there is no sidewalk that's there, but it is right-of-way, and you can park on it. And so there is an area there where people regularly park on the south side of Pico. And I know that's been an issue for one of the appellants, at least, cars parking in that location.
And you mentioned the parking issue is one of the issues, but there are some other issues that were raised in the appeal. Do you want to just explain what those are for the rest of us?
So the appeal that came to council was really related to the one issue, and that was it. Previously, they raised issues related to trash receptacles in that location, some drainage issues, that exist in that location, possibly made worse by some improvements that were made related to the house to the south of the subject lot. They put drainage through out to the Pico, to the street. The lot on the south, which reflects one of the appellants owns, is at almost or maybe below the grade of Pico, and so some of the water that comes out of that drainage system likely goes somewhat onto their lots, but then continues to drain on down to Pico and out to the end. I mean, so there are some drainage issues there. This project actually may help some of that because it's going to remove they graded the area going up to the garage a while ago, and so they're going to be removing that driveway, and so that'll remove a little bit of the barrier to some of that water going directly into Pico, so that might help that situation a little bit. And then again, the main issue is that cars pull up there and load and unload into the garage and or maybe park there for a little while. Most of the pictures that you see in the staff report relate to unloading and loading of things in and out of the garage onto vehicles or into vehicles. Well, the garage is going to be gone, so the issue's not going to be there anymore, and now there's going to be an open-air parking space for cars to park in, so I think we're probably alleviating some of the parking issues that are experienced by the appellants, potentially some of the drainage issues that they're experiencing, and parking should be somewhat improved because there'll be a parking space on site that gets used versus a garage that was not really used for parking.
Okay, then my last question. Is the fence, the rear fence, part of the Planning Commission's amendment to this requirement?
The fence was not part of that. The fence was part of the plan that was submitted and approved by the Planning Commission, or by staff, and then reviewed by the Planning Commission on appeal.
So they could decide not to put it up, or?
It's part of the plan that we approved.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Other council member questions of staff at this time?
Yes.
Thank you, Councilman Davis.
And I would like to say that I also had an ex parte meeting with the appellants. I rode my bike up to the site on Sunday to look at it, and the appellants approached me and spoke to me about their situation. So I've not had any dealings with the applicant. But my question has to do with the parking. You said that there is no required parking for ADUs, but does the main residence have to provide parking for a number of cars?
So because we're converting the garage, we can require them to provide those parking spaces that would otherwise be located there on site. And so they're doing that.
Okay, so a residence in Morro Bay does have to provide parking on site for 2 vehicles?
One or 2 spaces, yes.
1 or 2, okay.
Depending on the size of the lot and the size of the home.
Okay, and that's what's happening with this?
Yeah, they're replacing the parking on site. We can't require them to build a new garage. That's part of accessory dwelling unit law currently. So, but we can require them to replace the parking on site, and they've done that. 1 space accessed off of Greenwood, and then 1 off of Pico. It will require some changing and some removal of some landscaping and that type of thing, and removing of a garden fence on the Greenwood side.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Other council member questions of staff? Looking to my left? Looking to my right? None? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. And we'll move to open the public hearing, and we'll look for the appellant to come forward and make their presentation.
The right time now?
You got it.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Judith Johnston, 2590 Elm Avenue, family home for the last 40 years. And I started to talk to you about the history of it because I think there's something important in that. At the beginning of the sale of that house, we were concerned about opening up the backyard, and we had a letter from the city Public Works saying that don't worry, they can never build on the public road. And then they did build on the public road, and we talked to the city, and they said, well, we don't have the means to enforce it, but we will make sure that it's removed. And even with the letter stating that they had 7 days to remove it or all that. And then all of a sudden it came back and said, okay, everything's fine with it. They can need access to their driveway. Well, at that time, and why this is important, at that time we took a major loss in property value. Their property, going by Zillow, which it does now and then, increased by $20,000. Each of our properties decreased by $20,000 with that opening of the road. And we kind of felt, we tried to do everything right, proactive ahead of time, but we were just said, no, this is the way it is. And at that time is when started the flooding of the garage, the drainage issues, all of these things, and we were told it's just residents' problems. Well, that's the history of it. But as far as this rental unit, we're all for the rental unit. No, fine, that's things that are needed, but not to the detriment of our property value. And this is where we were very pleased with the Public Works proposition of what they had to put the parking places in the front, but it was overruled by the commission on that October meeting. And I kind of feel that in the Greenwood property, they have converted both of their double garages into living areas. They've built on the maximum percentage, so they can't build anything else on there. And it's a detriment to our property. I like parking in my garage. I like having parking spaces. I didn't know I would be penalized for that. We were very do that for the rental unit, but they would not concede to any concession on that. They said if they didn't get their parking spaces, it was a deal breaker. Which was, okay. So that's the issue with that. The second thing that the last appellant said that what we needed was stricter enforcement of the parking laws for everyone in that area. It's a horrible parking situation with the the housing unit there that doesn't allow guest parking on there, and so everyone has to park on the streets, all the doctors, nurses, everything. It's a horrible parking situation. So we were very pleased when they said, yes, stricter enforcement of the parking issues. And they said, because there haven't been any parking tickets issued. I said, well, it's not for lack of trying. We certainly have called the police many, over 25 times, had them come out to look at it, and they always just ask the person to move their car. And the last commission said that if they were enforced stronger, that maybe once or twice getting a ticket, they wouldn't be parking there anymore. So calling on the police, I said, yeah, that's a great idea. And last time I called the police out for a car that had been parked there over 3 days, and a young policeman, and I was told, he called me and said, well, they live in that area, so as far as I'm concerned, they can park there as long as they want. They can park there for 180 days straight. And I'm looking at the policeman saying, I don't think that's the law, but who am I to tell him to enforce it? So we can't get enforcement of the parking from the police, and I have not talked to the captain before, and I should have. So that was the issue, them to get stricter enforcement, but we can't do anything. We just feel like we're lost. We can't get a ticket issued. We can't get parking moved. We can't do that. And the devaluation of the houses, I mean, we just can't let this go on. It just is not possible. So that's my situation, and we're looking at that. Plus, the parking, blocking it, we have over 300 pictures of cars blocking our driveways when we can't get in and out. And this most recent one is the delivery trucks, where they delivering it looked like water heater of everything for the new apartment. But the delivery trucks are in my driveway and doing all of that. And what do? Call the police? They won't tell them, I really feel stuck. Anyway, my whole situation is, I'm glad to have a rental unit there. I wish they would go with the original recommendation of the commission, the Works Department. But my main thing, I just want to see the law enforced consistently and evenly to all parties. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Council, any questions for Ms. Johnson? Looking to my left? No. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now hear from the respondent. Welcome.
Thank you for taking time to look at our proposal. My name's Dan Kroll. I'm the owner at 2575 Greenwood. We purchased the property in 2011 with the exact same footprint that now exists. We did remodel. What originally was there on the Pico side was a carport, and we applied for a permit to turn that into a garage. And so when we turned it into a garage, the approach to the garage was as it is now. We covered it with gravel. That was then decided that was not a great idea, and so the city required we cut out a little bit of the driveway to allow access to Mrs. Johnson's driveway. And so we asphalted the approach, and a little bit after that, it was made clear by the city that we were not to park cars there in the approach for any length of time, so we just used the garage to load and unload sports equipment, groceries, things like that. But we usually use the right-of-way in front of Mrs. Johnson's house to park any cars, any vehicles. So we have applied for to make this into an accessory dwelling unit. I believe Mr. Graham has made a better argument than I could make, that I believe that the new plan will actually help the parking situation by providing more clearly defined signage of where cars can and can't be on that dead end at Pico. So we do believe that if there is a situation with parking, that it's a law enforcement issue. However, this seems like a city permit guidance issue. If the plan is within city permit guidance within the legal structure of the accessory dwelling unit and the requirements of the city, we request that the project be approved. And if it's not within the guidelines of the city and the state, we would love feedback on what we need to do to change the project. And the project was never presented with 2 parking spaces on the Greenwood side of the property. It started out as turning the shed into an accessory dwelling unit. That was denied because of lot coverage, and so we changed that to remove the shed, place the parking spot there, and have another 1 parking spot on the Greenwood side of the property. So I'm open for questions.
Great. Council, questions of Mr. Kroll? None here? None here? Okay. Thank you much. Appreciate that, Mr. Kroll. I'm going to open it up to public comment. Any members of the public wanting to speak on this issue, you're invited to come forward at this time. No need to fill out a speaker's slip, nor state your name, address, or locale. Seeing no, we do have, looks like. Sir, are you coming up for public comment? No? Yes? Okay, great. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Clay Kearney. I live at 2600 Elm Avenue. It's adjacent to the dwelling unit that's been temporarily approved. What this is really about is a parking issue. Again, we don't have any restrictions on the dwelling unit itself. The first 5 years that the Krolls were at their location on Greenwood, they had no parking on their lot. So they didn't park a car in their driveway for the first 5 years, or excuse me, in their garage, and they took out their 2-car driveway and landscaped over it. So the only place they could park is either in front of their home, which is a very small area, or again in the back area in Pico. And that's what this is really about. The city has set up a situation that has created a problem for the people in the 2 houses and the house on Greenwood. So this is what this is about. It's not something that really should have happened, and we've talked to the Planning Commission about this. They didn't really do anything. We're finally here to the City Council, and we just don't want 2 wrongs to make a right. They will be parking in our driveways. They will be turning around in our driveways. They will be putting their cars, unloading things in our driveways. And we have many pictures over the last 6 years of this fact. So it must be addressed. We don't want someone to come and use our driveway to turn around, and there isn't any other place to turn around. That's the real issue. It should have never been approved in the first place, but now we're here at this time, and that's what we would like to address. So we have many pictures to this fact. We've sent the pictures in, and we have a lot more as well. But we just want a fence across the back area, just like when the house was bought 40 years ago. My partners lived in the house at 2600 Elm for almost 30 years. When she bought the home, there was a fence that went across. There was no ability to park cars in the carport. That never happened. So when the Krolls came, they did get a permit, but there was no precedent for the cars to be parked in the carport. So what we want is we want a couple parking spots back on front of Greenwood. You can have the dwelling unit, it's not a problem, but just close off the fence and be consistent with all the other homes in Morro Bay. That's what we would like. And we don't feel it's fair for the city to set up a problem for us to have to call the police to get in and out of our driveways. And that's just, that's not really what we're looking for. We want you to govern, but not in the sense that you're creating an issue for the two homeowners that have been there for 40 and 30 years respectively.
Thank you, Mr. Kearney.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Any other members of the public like to speak to the issue? You're welcome to come forward at this time. Seeing none, we will close public comment, and the appellant at this time, if you'd like to respond, you certainly may do that, Ms. Johnson, to any remarks made by the respondent. If you'd like to respond to that, that'd be fine. You don't have to. I'm just giving you the opportunity.
No, it's not a response, but in addition to?
Certainly. Come forward, please.
One of the things that has exacerbated the situation, and it seems somewhat petty on my part, but 2575 Greenwood has put, everyone agrees it was a lot that never sold. And so it was a dead-end lot and it was all that. But when they opened up the access, they also put gates on north and south properties. So each of the properties to the south of them and to the north of them all have access to this little tiny area. So it's the three houses back there, our houses, and then the new dwelling unit. Well, that's a total of 15 trash cans that go out in this little space. And the city said, well, there's no regulation on where they put trash cans or whatever. But I know, all of us don't want to have 15 trash cans sitting out in front of your house, especially when parking is at such a premium for all the doctors and nurses that come and everything. So opening up to all of these other neighbors has really caused it to impede more. And they said, well, they're not parking there now, but it doesn't mean that who's going to buy it next, who's going to be living there at the next time. And we just want the laws to be clear and straight about what's happening there. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Yes, appreciate that. Okay. With that, we will close the public hearing and ask for discussion by council. Who'd like to start us off? Councilmember Heller. Thank you.
I had an opportunity to visit the property as well because I think seeing it is very helpful. The pictures in the plan are pretty descriptive, but actually seeing the situation is very helpful. I visited the property. I had a discussion with the appellants. Morro Bay has a lot of inconsistencies and unusual qualities to it, and we like to call it neighborhood character. But there are instances where things were built years ago and problems exist as a result of that neighborhood character. And this is one of those situations where you have a street ending into the back of a house. You have a number of different issues and things that have been done over the last 40 or 50 years, which have not really helped things much. So I feel for the applicants on this as well as the appellants. You're kind of stuck in that situation. So it's kind of a double-edged sword to have a town with a lot of character and also a lot of non-conforming, semi-problematic issues like this one. I'm personally inclined to wonder how realistic it is for our police department to enforce parking regulations on a regular basis. When I think about the entire city, when I visited the site, I was struck by the fact that the street is a dead end, really, without a properly approved turnaround or what would be required if that neighborhood were to be built today. So there are a number of existing conditions that are problematic. My inclination is to keep parking spaces on the Greenwood side of this property because I think the access in and out, it probably makes more sense and in some ways relieves the ongoing congestion and problems that seem developed at this particular location. So those are my comments and thoughts, and I thank the appellants and the applicants for going through this process, which has been lengthy, and I thank the appellants for being forthright in their discussions with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion, other council members, comments?
Well, my inclination is to agree with the staff recommendation, and having visited the Greenwood property from the front, I can see that their entire front yard would be a parking lot. So I can understand why they would not want to put 2 parking spaces in the front. I honestly believe that this solution that we have eventually come to will improve the parking situation in the area. Parking is a problem everywhere in our city, and I know so many people don't use their garage for their cars. They park on the street, they park in the driveways. It's a common problem, so I understand that problem, and I appreciate the concern. But I truly believe that the staff recommendation, which is to put the fence so there will not be parking where the concern is now, and 1 space will help to alleviate the parking situation. And having spoken to the respondent, they are quite happy. They don't mind putting their trash cans on the Greenwood side. They said that they had actually put them where the garbage company would like to see them, and of course that would be more convenient for the garbage company to have them all in a row. So, but I think they're amenable to other solutions and working with their neighbors, and I would like to see it resolved in a very peaceful way. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Very much appreciate that. Looking to my left for comments.
Yes. I am impressed that the applicant has complied with all requirements for a permit. And as Mr. Clay said in public comment, this is a parking issue. In my mind, I'm having trouble connecting a building permit with a parking issue. What we are hearing tonight is an application for a building permit. And to me, the parking issue is separate. That's an enforcement issue. If the applicant has complied with all requirements, I don't see how we can deny the permit. So that's my feeling.
Thank you. Councilmember Addis.
I don't have questions so much as when I was going through this information, I did the number of photos that one neighbor is taking of another neighbor's property stood out to me, and I felt concerned about that. I did read the letter from the applicant saying that they feel concerned about the number of photos being taken of their property. I did reach out to the police chief to ask him about that, simply because it stood out to me even before I read the letters. I just want to express that I do empathize with the concern about being photographed, and I would like to reiterate Councilperson McPherson's comments that I hope this can be resolved peacefully, regardless of how the council vote goes, that from neighbor to neighbor, I really would encourage that kind of peaceful communication and being able to help each other feel safe in that area.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Heller, for your comments about some of the interesting eclectic neighborhoods that we have and the particular challenges that staff has with enforcement issues, parking, et cetera. I think we're all aware of that, and I appreciated your recognition of that. The issue related by Councilmember Davis resonates with me. I'm not quite sure how the parking issue directly relates to any violation of law, given the requirement for issuing the permit. It's evident to me that there has been, from what I've heard and read from the staff report, no violation of either the zoning ordinance, general plan, local coastal plan, or state law. I, too, am supportive of staff's findings and recommendations, and would look for a motion from council at this time.
I will make a motion.
I'll second. You have to make it first.
I do.
I'm so excited.
She's ready to get her first second in.
I know.
I haven't talked all night, so.
I move the City Council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's denial of the appeal of the Director's approval of Administrative Coastal Development Permit number CPO-575 for the accessory dwelling unit at 2575 Greenwood by adopting City Council Resolution number 01-19 with the associated findings and conditions of approval.
Is there a second?
Now I'll second.
Motion by Councilmember McPherson, second by Councilmember Addis. Any further discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
No.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Motion
that
carries 4-1.
Thank you. And that motion is the outline motion in the staff report, word for word. So thank you for that. Thank you, staff, for your presentation. Thank you both to the appellant and the respondent for being here this evening. Difficult issues, we know, but we do appreciate you coming out, and hopefully you can resolve some of the issues with regard to your concerns about parking. Okay, with that, we'll move to item number C1. Let me grab my goodies. Item C1 is consideration for authorization for attendance at CMAQ, and I'll turn it over to our infamous Harbor Director, Mr. Endersby, to present the report. Thank you, Mr. Endersby.
Infamous. Okay.
You got it.
Thank you, Mayor Heading, and Happy New Year to you all. I'm going to handle the CMAQ portion of this, then turn it over to the city manager to handle his other half, where he's considering going to Washington, D.C. for the wharf project as well, and so I'll let he and Rob Liveck handle that part. So thank you again for heading this off. So it's time again for starting to plan for our annual week of Washington, D.C. with CMAQ, which is a California Marine Affairs and Navigation Conference, which is a professional group we are members of that deals primarily with ensuring the Corps of Engineers comes and regularly dredges our harbors up and down the coast, including Morro Bay. We get about $3 million, have historically gotten about $3 million a year from the Corps for that dredging. We don't do it. We don't get the money ourselves personally, but Corps of Engineers in LA gets it, and they do the dredging on the city's behalf, and then come about every 7 to 8 years to dredge the whole harbor. And so without that funding, our harbor would pretty soon turn back to the way it was, which was not a deep water harbor as it is now. So it's time for that trip planning. We're going the first week in March 4th through the 7th, I believe, is our dates for CMAQ this year. We're already working with our consultant in Washington, D.C. to start preliminary planning those meetings. I'm going down to Newport Beach tomorrow morning to go do our winter meeting with CMAQ, which we do for 2 days down Newport Beach. And we'll start putting together our itineraries and talking points and making sure everybody's on the same page. As we go with CMAQ, it's been a pretty effective group over the decades that we've been involved, all going together, harbors and ports, from the small ones like us in Port St. Louis and Monterey to the large ones like Port of LA and San Diego and Long Beach. We all go singing the same tune, and to the same legislators and the same folks in DC to pitch our wares, so to say, to ensure that we get our dredging money. So again, we've been going to D.C. for at least about 20 years now. The last, I want to say 10 years, we've gotten funding from the from the Joint Cable Fisheries Liaison Committee, which we'll be looking for again. What we primarily do is look for dredging, visiting the Corps of Engineers and our legislators to make sure we get dredging money. We also go to NOAA fisheries and NOAA sanctuaries when there's fishery and sanctuary issues. We go to Department of Transportation, Council on Environmental Quality, lots of other issues that the city's facing that we're able to go take advantage of in D.C. and visit legislatures and others to take care of. This year we'll be going as well for BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, for the wind farm project. We went last year and visited BOEM. That's going to be a hot topic again this year. Visiting other legislators potentially that on the East Coast that in Rhode Island where they currently have a wind farm sited. So we're going to be looking to visit those legislators to see what their experience is, and also maybe the ones in Massachusetts where they just recently did a bid with BOEM for several multi-million-dollar projects potentially going on there. In addition to the meetings, we have a Golden State reception, which is a reception that CMB puts on for both the legislators and staffers to attend, Coast Guard members, Army Corps of Engineers members, and staffers up and down the aisle on both sides. Unknown quite how the government shutdown is going to affect this trip. Hopefully the shutdown is ended by then. If not, we may have some larger problems going on. But Golden State reception is another great venue for us to meet and greet with the staffers and key legislators and others that ensure that the funding flows and all these things in Washington, D.C. happen. Really quite an interesting meeting, and really reiterates the point. The first year I went, I was a little bit skeptical, thinking, what can one little person from a town like this in Morro Bay accomplish? But you'd be surprised. You see Boy Scout groups and other people there visiting their senators and legislators, and one person can make a difference. I'm happy to say and say, get involved, because you can make a difference. So we're requesting at this point from the City Council for authorization for a two-person delegation. That would be the mayor and myself on behalf of CMB to go to Washington, D.C. To address all these critically important issues. Our estimated cost is $6,000 to $8,000 for this two-person delegation. Last year we were right around $7,000. Again, we applied for a cable committee grant last year and were granted one for $8,000, so pretty much all of our costs were covered. We're looking at applying for another grant this year, anticipate getting it. Cable committee doesn't meet until mid to late March, so we'll have to pay for the trip in advance and then get reimbursed afterwards. If the cable committee grant isn't approved by the cable committee, we'll be coming back to the City Council for authorization to pull that out of the budget. Again, I don't anticipate that, knock on wood. And any other preliminary input the council may have, we'll be coming back to the council, the second meeting likely in February, to discuss more specifically what our agenda will be, some draft letters or white papers to our legislators and others, and any other council input or guidance they want to give in terms of our meeting. But we'll get a little more into the weeds then in February. And I'll turn it over to the city manager if he wants to take over on the wharf part, or if we want to jump in the middle of the CMB part, depending on how we want to do it.
Yeah. If there's any questions on CMB, or do you want to hold those till the end?
I'll just hold those to the end.
Very good. Okay. As council and community are quite aware, the wharf project will be the most substantial project completed if it moves forward by the city, both in terms of scope and cost. We've heard from numerous community members that they're ultimately concerned most about the cost of the overall project, both total number as well as what the impact will be on their monthly water and sewer bills. Obviously went through the 218 process this summer, significant number of protests, which is indicative of that concern. So we take it very, very seriously, the responsibility to do all we can to bring that number down so it never actually achieves that $41 surcharge amount for single-family homes. And the way that we can do that, at minimum, to keep it where it is to secure the WIFIA loan, but also to seek other federal funding and state funding. And part of the rationale to go to Washington, D.C., in fact, the main rationale, is to do what we can to secure the WIFIA and seek out other funding, be it with the Army Corps of Engineers, grant programs, or the Bureau of Rec Title 16, Water Smart Grant, USDA. I know last year we were shut out because of we exceed the 10,000 minimum for rural communities. However, there is a democratically controlled House now which may entertain earmarks, which were essentially abolished for the last 8 years. Los Osos was able to receive funding through earmarks prior to those being shut off with the ARA under the Obama administration. So there are opportunities. Of course, that's all assuming that the federal government will be open in March. Of course, our hopes are that they will. So what we're recommending is that at this point, a 2-person delegation of city staff as well, which isn't included in this report, did some deliberation over the weekend and thought it might be important to include a recommendation that the WRF program manager also attend alongside the city manager and public works director, as they've assumed the leadership of this project. However, the city manager and the public works attending for the continuity of the relationships we've already established with Congressman Carbajal and our U.S. senators for the state of California, which did bear fruit in receiving a letter of support by Congressman Carbajal for the Whitfield loan. We think it's important to maintain that continuity, but also recognize the leadership of the WRF program manager. If you combined all those costs of the 3 attendees, it would put it in the $9,000 to $11,000 range out of the water and wastewater enterprise funds. The Corollo program manager would attend on his own, go through his own logistics to secure that, but ultimately the cost would be borne upon the ratepayers. So we just wanted to make sure that was understood as an additional recommendation. Of course, ultimately a decision is made by City Council as to the size of that delegation, and we can make changes depending upon what your level of support is for that. But bottom line is, we think it's important that there is a delegation that attends alongside the CMB contingent, that we maintain and strengthen those relationships with our congressional delegation and with the agencies who hold the keys to significant funding that we may not have been able to tap into at this point. And like Eric had mentioned, we intend to come back with our itinerary for council to review prior to us attending, so you understand all the folks that we'll be meeting with, as well as some of the advanced material that we'll create, so that those who are very busy in Washington and have little to no time to consume information, that we get the most distilled information possible, the most salient points for those agencies, so that they can feel as supportive as possible for our project.
Thank you. We'll open it up for council questions on either the CMANC portion and or the other portion, WRF portion.
Okay. So I have a question about the consultant we have in Washington, D.C. Is that consultant dedicated specifically to CMANC issues? Do they do other things for us? What are we paying them? Can somebody tell me about that?
Yeah, Eric can talk about the consultant that is maintained by CMANC, which is, the city's a part of that, but we have a specific lobbyist for the WRF project. Mike Miller, he's part of the Ferguson group. I believe they're on retainer, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, is it $40,000 a year? Is that correct? Ferguson, or is that overstating it?
It's $4,500 a month.
Okay, what is that overall? That's 50. I'm not going to do math.
48 plus 6 is 54.
$54,000
there you go. Sorry about that. Thanks for correcting me, Rob. So they are our eyes and ears in Washington year-round, specifically for the WRF project.
Okay. And our consultant for CMANC and the harbor issues is a group called Carpy and Clay. They've been our consultant or lobbyist there for more than 2 decades. They also represent pretty much every other harbor up and down the coast and CMANC. They're a lot cheaper than your guys, but we pay $8,400 a year for them, but it's because they're all grouped together with all the other harbors that makes it effective. And they focus primarily on Corps of Engineers and not just Corps of Engineers and dredging, but also harbor and coastal issues, but primarily the Corps of Engineers.
Okay, so with respect to the consultant for the WRF, what do they do for $4,500 a month?
Well, they keep us apprised of legislation. They have relationships with all of the various levels within the agencies that, to an outsider, are pretty much opaque and impossible to penetrate. I did spend 3 months on the Hill when I was a youngster back in the day, and understood that is something that you kind of cultivate over a lifetime. And so Mike Miller, who is our representative in the Ferguson group, has those relationships that are invaluable. And you know, some people might look at that and say that's overly costly, unnecessary, but it's sort of the price to pay to have those relationships, to be able to take advantage of those relationships, to be put in rooms with folks who understand the nuances and how to position ourselves better when it comes to funding, and also to have direct relationships and opportunities to speak with Congress members and understand, you know, what their values are and how we can connect best with those.
Okay. The other question I have, Eric, you had mentioned a number of agencies. Will you be meeting with NOAA and BOEM and these other organizations, these other agencies when you're there?
Yes. So from Port San Diego, LA, Oceanside Harbor, Marina Del Rey, we all go en masse. We all go during the same week. CMB itself has conference meetings where we all meet as a group and have speakers, and then we go, oftentimes breaking up into smaller groups, but oftentimes in large groups. For instance, we all went to met the head of the Department of Transportation a few years ago. All of us en masse will be led around DC by CMB and our consultant Carpy and Clay, and then we'll go off separately and do our own Morro Bay specific meetings as well.
Okay. Is there an agency there that you think we should be meeting with with respect to climate change?
NOAA would be the logical place I think that would live. Exactly what agency or bureau of that, I would have to look into that, but potentially yes. We've met, like I say, with NOAA Fisheries quite a bit, and National Marine Fisheries Service, and the NOAA Sanctuaries on those issues, but we've not specifically gone on climate change issues.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilman Addis.
Scott, did you say that for the city manager and the program manager to go be paid by ratepayers? And could you explain that a little?
Sure thing. If the three recommended is the Public Works City Manager and then the Program Manager. Ultimately, those would all be paid out of, what's being recommended is they all be paid out of the Water and Wastewater Enterprise Funds. Those are generated, the significant portion, 99% of that revenue is generated by our ratepayers who pay for water and sewer bills. That's how we generate that income, and because it's for the wharf project, which is paid out of the water and wastewater funds, that there's a nexus on this trip, and that's why we're making that recommendation that they be paid out of there.
But no more increases to ratepayers?
No, it won't affect. It won't affect. I mean, it's a budgeted expense, but we feel it's important to come before council because of the great importance of securing this financing and other funding opportunities, and because we're traveling across the country, and because there's multiple requested staff members to attend, that council have that opportunity to also look into that and also help understand what our itinerary will look like and maybe seek out other things that we hadn't thought of. And that's why we're having this discussion today.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Good.
I just have one follow-up question concerning 3 people going on the wharf. Is that because you think there's so many different agencies that you need to consult with, or is it because you need the expertise of all 3 people?
Yeah, I mean, part of it's continuity of relationships that have been built up over the past years, and then yes, a lot of it's around the expertise, and we can try to anticipate the questions that come, and we certainly do our best to do that. But in some meetings last year when we made this trip in March, there were highly technical questions that the city manager and the mayor would have been unable to answer, and certainly Rob would have. And I guess the argument can be made, well, if program managers going, maybe the public works director doesn't need to attend, but Rob has been on this project for 12 years and understands the details, the level that the program manager is still catching up on, and so that's the nature of the recommendation.
So it's more to ensure that you have the appropriate content in the meeting.
Right. But again, there's flexibility. There's other ways around that. If if that expenditure seems too high, we can make it work with 2, and that's, again, the discretion of the council.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Given that no further questions, I'll open it up for public comment. Anybody in the public would like to come forward and speak? Now is your opportunity. Welcome.
Thank you. Nancy Bast, Morro Bay. It is proposed that Mayor Heading and 2 staff members be sent to Washington, D.C. to lobby for the EPA WIFIA loan of $69 million, half of the $126 million.
Nancy, could you speak maybe directly? I can't quite hear you. Sorry.
Sorry.
No. We'll start you over.
Okay. It is proposed that Mayor Heading and 2 staff members be sent to Washington, D.C. to lobby for the EPA WIFIA loan of $69 million, which is half of the $126 million cost of the new sewer treatment plant and water reclamation project. The cost of the city manager and the public works director accompaniment is a probable $10,000 to be paid out of water and sewer ratepayers' bills. That's changed, and I'll get to that. Mayor Heading is certainly versed in the project, and as an elected official, surely would have the greatest influence advocating for the WIFIA loan. I feel Mayor Heading will serve the city well in D.C., and that staff members' attendance are not necessary, especially since the water sewer rate schedule is only estimated to cover the cost of the new WRF, and over $5 million has already been spent before a shovel has entered the ground. Also, a second lift station and a third pipeline have been deemed necessary that were not known in the $126 million estimate or included in the EIR. We know that Representative Carbajal has expressed active support for the project already, as have Senators Feinstein and Harris. The times call for the city to be prudently frugal. The staff should remain in Morro Bay. Mayor Heading will not travel alone, as he will be accompanied by the harbor director. And it's recently come to my attention, like tonight, that you're requesting a third person who is just a consultant to go also. In addition to that, we're told we have a lobbyist there that gets $54,000 a year. Does that come out of the ratepayers' payments for their water and sewer bill as well? It seems to me that we already, I've been told, have the WIFIA loan pretty much affirmed. So why do we need these people all to go? Mayor Heading can do a wonderful job for us, along with the already paid lobbyist that's there. Please reconsider how many people we have to pay to go there. That $10,000 for the staff, which now could be more, would go a long way towards replacing these tortuous chairs that we have to sit in. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Other public comment? Welcome, Ms. Winsholtz.
Thank you. Just so you know, the heaters never come on. The room's getting really cold back here. I want to speak to this because I believe that the grant that you're going for, the other grant that you mentioned, the SMART grant, isn't ready for us to apply for. It's from the Bureau of Reclamation. You have to have had completed a feasibility study for them to even consider it, and that feasibility cannot be done until you finish the pilot injection. So it's kind of like you're jumping the gun on going and asking for this loan or grant or others that may be there. It seems more likely that the harbor and the CMAQ intention should go ahead and go, and that when it's appropriate, then the other 2 or 3 people go later. But to go now is like an inappropriate time because you're not ready, and if you insist on trying to combine those things, then maybe the mayor needs to stay an extra day, and maybe the consultant needs to go with him, or Mr. Livick needs to go with him. But truly, the need for the 2 extra people seems out of excess. And you may not be feeling it, but certainly the public is feeling that every penny that you spend on consultants and travel and things that have nothing to do with getting our water to us and away from us, a sewer, is excessive because you've upped our rates so high. And so even though it may appear to be only $10,000 or plus dollars, that's a lot. And you're still taking it out of our pocket, and it's not going towards the benefit it's supposed to be going toward. So knowing that there's a lobbyist available, knowing that the mayor's going, and that even that topic should maybe not even be addressed now but later. And like Ms. Bass said, these representatives are already on our side. They're already there to help us, and it seems not like an effective job will be done. Effective in the sense that you won't talk to these people, but it may be better than the word effective. It's not a necessary item now, and that the timing is off. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to council. Open it up for discussion. Who'd like to start us off on discussion? Looking to my left and right. Oh, I saw. Thank you. Councilmember Davis.
Yes. Ms. Bast asked a question about where does the funding come from for the $54,000 a year for the Ferguson Group? Is that from water rates?
It's a project expense, so it comes from the Water and Wastewater Fund.
Okay.
And it's built into the $126 million. It's not in addition to that.
Correct.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Discussion?
Well, yes. Now that I've
now
asked,
that you asked a
that question,
that's fine.
I think that there is a lot of value to sending people to Washington to maintain our presence there. I've witnessed this myself firsthand, attending Bicycle Week with the League of American Bicyclists. These events are well organized, and they maximize time between our people from the city and the elected officials and the staff decision makers in Washington. And I'm glad that the city manager mentioned adding the program manager, because I was going to ask that question earlier. I think that's an excellent tactical move, and so I support staff's recommendation with the addition of the program manager as part of the delegation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank the Central Coast Joint Cable Fisheries Liaison Committee for giving this grant in the past, and I'm glad that I think we're optimistic that they'll give it this year. I think it's a wonderful joint venture to keep our harbor dredged, and I'm in full support of that. I would concur with Councilperson Davis. I think it's critical that we continue to communicate with Washington, and that Morro Bay stays in the forefront in Washington, and that Morro Bay gets in there early in terms of the Water Smart grant. I think with these kinds of things, you want to be known before the decisions are made and before the applications go in. You want to have your organization known, and so I appreciate the forethought on that piece of things, and would support all three people going.
Thank you. Other?
Okay, sure. And I concur with my two colleagues. Having been on this council now for 2 years and having heard this request before and then seeing the result come back, I know how important it is and how much work is done and that there's so many meetings and so many people. And right now is a critical time for the WRF project, and we really do have to be in front of those decision makers that control the money. And so, and especially now that I understand that it's really to have a good presence there, that's why you want to bring Eric, and so I would concur.
Thank you. Councilmember Heller.
So I'm concerned that we're spending $4,500 a month for a consultant who can't seem to represent us on the details of the WRF project. I'm just wondering if that is money well spent. I don't think it is, frankly. I think that needs to be looked at. It seems like an unnecessary expense if when it comes time to meeting with folks in Washington, we have to send 5 people there. I am concerned and agree with the comments about should the ratepayers be paying for all these trips as well as the consultant. It's fine that it's factored into the project cost, but is that an excessive and unnecessary cost? And I think it is. I don't quite understand what the consultant is doing for us, except setting up meetings. I'd be happy to move to Washington, D.C. and do that for you for $4,500 a month.
So let me focus the discussion on the staff report and the recommendation for sending delegates to Washington.
Okay.
Thanks.
So my recommendation, I support recommendation number 1, which is sending the mayor and the director of the harbor. I don't see the need for sending any additional people. I think it's an unnecessary expense.
Thank you. Having been to Washington last year, I can speak to the importance of going. It is a critical trip that not only maintains relationships but also builds upon new relationships that are established when we're there. I think the CMB trip has proven itself year after year. It represents not only the fishing industry, but also critically provides the opportunity to continue to get dredging dollars for this community. Extremely important. We do see a number of individuals, not only from our state elected officials, but also other states that have current perspectives that are similar to ours and often support us. With regard to the other issues regarding the WRF, we have begun last year establishing relationships with critical organizations. We visited a number of organizations, including BOEM, NOAA, the Bureau of Reclamation, EPA, WIFIA, at least 6 senators and or congressional folks that were extremely helpful in moving initiatives forward. And I probably haven't captured all of the visits that we had. It was a whirlwind trip. During that trip, recognized the importance as public comment has been given of the mayor being there. They expect that figurehead individual to be there and to support and lend credence to the process. In addition to that, it was very helpful to have the city manager there, whom they also look to as the CEO of the organization or the city, to be there. And I found it extremely helpful to have technical experts there because there were a number of questions regarding the technical components of the project that I know I wouldn't have been able to answer specifically, and or Mr. Collins probably wouldn't have been able to answer. And so I do see the importance of having those staff members present and available to answer and speak to the project that we're talking about. In addition to that, this also presents an opportunity for us to visit other entities regarding the potential wind energy and wind farm. It's a time to continue to begin to have discussions at the federal level for that, and although we have representation on the interagency task force, we connect with other elected officials that can assist us in moving that initiative forward, which has significant, potentially positive economic impact for the city. In addition to that, we also have the opportunity and have discussed with the Ferguson Group the opportunity to talk with specific members of Congress and with the House of Representatives regarding earmarks. And we're thinking about potential for cleanup of the power plant site. Earmarks have been non-existent for a period of time. We understand through the Ferguson Group representatives that there may be opportunities for consideration of earmark funds, and the city needs to be in line to get its message forward to those representatives that are important in making those decisions and possibly making that happen. The Bureau of Reclamation grant, or the grant pursuit, is critical. That's money that doesn't have to be repaid, and we began the discussion last year, and I believe it's critically important to continue that discussion this year. With regard to the Ferguson Group, Mike Miller, who is the lead individual, has relationships that opened many doors for us that I don't believe would have been opened without his assistance. And I found his presence to be extremely helpful. He will be there with us and is extremely important in getting us into the right places to make these kinds of trips happen. So with that, I do support the staff report recommendation, including the program manager going to Washington, D.C. to move this initiative forward. With that, I would entertain a motion from anyone who would like to make a motion?
I can make the motion.
Sure.
Unless somebody else wants to make it. I recommend that we authorize a two-person delegation to attend the CMB 2019 Washington Week meetings in Washington, D.C. That's the week of March 4th through the 7th, and authorize a three-member delegation, city manager, public works, and program manager, to travel alongside the mayor and the harbor director to meet relevant federal agencies in support of the water reclamation facility funding and permitting.
Motion by Councilmember McPherson. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Councilmember Davis. Any further discussion? If not, voice vote, please.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
No.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
The motion carries 4-1 with Councilmember Heller opposed.
Thank you for that robust discussion. With that, that concludes item C1. Thank you, Mr. Andrersby, for your staff report, as well as Mr. Collins for your report. Move to item C2, discussion and direction regarding Resolution 2718, pledging to follow best practices of civility and civil discourse. With that, I will turn it over to staff to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mayor Heading.
Thank you.
And City Council, I'm going to tee this up quickly for you. This item is presented as an opportunity for the council to review and discuss Resolution 2718, pledging to follow best practices of civility and civil discourse. This policy was a commitment by the City Council on behalf of its appointed officials and staff to promote the use of and adherence to the principles of civility and civil discourse in all of its meetings, and has been incorporated into the council policies and procedures and advisory bodies handbook and bylaws. In the report, staff also provided a copy of the SLO County Code of Civility, which was signed by SLO County officials and mayors of SLO County cities in June of 2018. Many of the tenets of that document were incorporated into the current city policy. Staff recommends the council discuss and either affirm the current adopted policy or provide input as to desired changes that would be brought back at a future meeting. In addition, the council may discuss and consider any changes that they would like to make to the page 1 of the council agenda regarding public comment. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. Any council questions of our city clerk? Looking to my left. Questions? Not seeing any heads nod. No questions? Okay. With there being no questions, I'll open up for public comment. Anybody from the public like to speak to this item? Seeing nobody from the public interested in speaking to this item, I'll close public comment and bring it back for discussion. I'll start off and indicate that I agendized this as a member of the previous council, specifically because of discussions I had with community members, several constituents that I met with one-on-one to discuss the way we conduct business as a council and a community. The issue was also a concern that I had about several different documents floating around, a resolution that previously existed, a resolution that was adopted more recently, and then a code of conduct that was looked at and apparently never codified individually as its own, that was agreed to by a number of different cities and entities, public entities. And so I was looking for clarification. And in reading the great staff report by our city clerk, I looked at the detail of Resolution 2718 that was passed on November of 2015, and noted that in looking through all of the whereases associated with it, literally everything is covered in the county discussed Code of Civility that you have as page number, if I can read it, 232 of 289. Every point in there is included in this resolution. I checked that against the previous resolution, 70-15, and noted that everything was included except for one whereas that only spoke to the fact that words be chosen carefully before being used. That was the only portion that was not included in the resolution. And so I really wanted to have discussion with council about the appropriateness of this, adhering to it, both not only as a council, but laying the expectation on the community as well, that the expectation is a two-way conversation. And then lastly, consider how we receive public comment. And as you noted today, or this evening, I opened up with comments regarding the need not to fill out a form. There is no state requirement, certainly no requirement to, or federal requirement to either state your name, address, or any of that, or to fill out the form. It is helpful, as I said, to have that as chair, but certainly not mandated. And so one of the considerations was to look at the very front page as well of our agenda and our public comment period statement, specifically involving the part that speaks to the effectiveness of public comment period, and the following rules shall be followed, and they are listed there as you note in the front of our agenda. So I really want to open up dialogue, basically ask the question, how do you feel about the Resolution 2718? In looking at that, is there anything you might want to direct either staff or council to look at in further detail? If not, I'm looking for affirmation of that, buy-in, and then the possibility of also looking at how we take public comment and revising, if necessary, any of the points noted in the front of our agenda. So that's the little more of the history behind that, and with that, we have no council questions, and I'll just open it up for the remainder of you to chime in. And
excuse me, Mr. Mayor,
yes.
If I could, just a point of order.
Please.
I would suggest that if there is going to be a discussion on revising public comment or agenda format, that we consider agendizing that item for a future meeting and not necessarily engage in a discussion on that. So
I was thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Thanks, Chris. On page 230 of the staff report. It says in the first paragraph, as new council is seated, staff recommends the Code of Civil Discourse be reviewed and affirmed or updated as the council deems necessary. Based on the direction provided at this meeting, staff will work to incorporate key themes into instructions for public comment. And I'll clarify it by making that statement, not necessarily changing it at this meeting, but following what staff report says and keying into those themes. And thank you for that clarification.
Okay, perfect,
Appreciate
Mr.
it.
Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I'll open it up for any comments that my compadres might have.
Okay. I'd like to start on this one. I'd like to thank you for the way you started the meeting and clarification of what the actual legal requirements are in terms of coming to the lectern. It is important that people understand that you don't have to give your name, address, or you can come anonymously if you want to. The only downside to that is that if you're written up in the minutes, they won't identify as an individual, but if that's what you want to do, it's completely legal, and I appreciate you for clarifying that and also removing the requirement for written speaker requests. I think codes of civility are very important. I think most people perceive them, at least people who are not sitting up on a dais, most people perceive them as ways that public agencies can keep down dissent or keep meetings under control. I think meetings need to be under control, but I don't think code of civility should ever be used as a means of eliminating dissent. So I'm 100% supportive of it as written.
Great. Thank you very much for those comments. Appreciate it. Councilmember Addis, I see you're motioning.
Oh, I thought Marlis had something to say.
Go ahead.
Well, we can, John is doing this differently.
I'm not going in order. I'm looking for, one of these days I'll have one of these devices that will give me a 1, 2, 3.
I guess I'm a little confused. Are we talking, can I comment on the cover of the agenda? Or
You sure can.
I can, okay. And I'm in full support of the resolution when we get there. I'm wondering, though, on the cover of the agenda, are speaker slips preferred? They're not required. If they're preferred, you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting you're calling speaker slips people who have turned in speaker slips first. Is that the practice that we are asking for, and if so, does that go on the cover of the agenda? Just so that we all understand, obviously it's not required, as you said, but if I turn one in, do I get preference? Or a member of the public, if they turn one in, do they get preference? And I just think that should somewhere be written down so people understand. And I would also say it might be helpful for folks who have never made comment just to understand the speaker slip process if they want to use one. Where are they located? Who do they take it to? At what point do they take that? I don't know that the cover of the agenda is the place for that, maybe the website, but that's somewhere that is laid out a little bit more. And I don't know if there's anything that specifically calls out profanity on here, but if there isn't, that would be a suggestion, because I have heard profanity not from council but from community members. And I just think that there is this piece about violence and incivility. So not on the agenda cover, but on Resolution 2718. I wouldn't mind having that added about profanity. And that's it from me.
Thank you. And Councilmember McPherson.
Yes, I wanted to just mention that the original resolution that we passed on civility was brought to the council by the League of Women Voters. And so they had studied this issue. They still have a civil discourse committee. I am a member of that organization. And one of their recommendations is that you post the Code of Civility at the very entrance to the hall so that the public is very aware. And you could also, in fact, include instructions on how to make public comment. As to speaker slips, I think it's good to have it discretionary at the mayor's prerogative, but I know that if you have 200 people in the room, all of whom want to speak, you're going to need speaker slips. So I would not just do away with them, but rather at the discretion, depending on the type of meeting. That seems to make sense. It's sort of interesting, the League of Women Voters, they are actually at every single San Luis Obispo City council meeting, and they sit in the back and they help voters or people coming in to actually orient them to the process, explain how to make public comment, and it's obviously very helpful. They call it a concierge service, but something like that we could consider, especially in a controversial topic or one where we expect a lot of members of the public. I support the current resolution that we passed, I believe, last year, and I like the idea that we do it every year. I think lack of profanity is certainly inferred, since you're supposed to be courteous and treat colleagues in a professional manner. But if you think we need to actually say no profanity, I don't mind that. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis.
Yes, sir. I appreciate, Mayor Heading, that you did make the change about people stating their name and place of residence, because that is not a legal requirement. And I like the idea of renewing the resolution every year and posting it. And I like the idea of adding profane language here where it is appropriate. And I like the idea also of an explanation of the speaker slips. And I think that does belong on the front page of the agenda under the public comment. So that being said, I'm willing to steal everyone's good ideas and agree with them.
Well stated. Did you capture everything? Do you want me to read back the comments as I got them, or do you think you've got it? Absolutely.
There is mention of profanity here on the directions to the public, and I think my suggestion would be to lift that sentiment or that statement to be in the council's code of conduct so that they match. So the one on the agenda says, the council respectfully requests that you refrain from making slanderous, profane, or personal remarks against any elected official, commission, and or staff, that gets lifted into the code of civility so that it's also the council adhering to that as well.
So consideration for adding it to Resolution 27-18. Chris, would that be a new resolution that would have to come back, or?
We're going to be changing the actual agenda format. Then I would suggest that we just bring back a new resolution that would incorporate the changes that are being suggested.
Great.
We could do that for the next meeting, I would think.
Thanks. Great suggestions. I appreciate you taking the opportunity to look at this, review it. I think they're very helpful. It's also important for the community to understand and abide by these. It goes both ways, and I do like the idea of an annual review, especially when we have new council members that come onto council. So it seems to me that I saw heads nodding from staff that they've captured everything. That's correct. There's no motion necessary.
I could just summarize what my understanding is, that we were going to have actually a placard in the back that lists the code of civility, that there would be instructions on how to use the speaker slips on the front of the agenda, and also have a stronger emphasis on the use of profane language, and make sure it applies to both the public and council members equally.
Also, the mention of a concierge service from the League of Women Voters, that was also mentioned as a possibility of inviting them. Is that what you were?
I wasn't really implying that, but I was assuming that we could have somebody, a staff member, not necessarily, I believe they pay the league to do that. But when we're on a controversial issue, it would be helpful to have somebody at the back of the room who can greet people and explain how they might make public comment.
I'm going to digress for a minute and say also that I appreciate doing roll call votes, because I know we have heard several times from members of the community that they did not understand who was voting which way or what the final tally was, and I think you have addressed that very adroitly with the roll call vote. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good? We're good to go? All right. How are we doing? We need.
Pardon me, Mayor, may I
Yes,
ask one
absolutely.
point of clarification?
Yes.
My understanding, I think, was that Resolution 2718 would come back and we would incorporate the one bullet point from the front of the agenda into that Code of Civility. So we'll bring that back at a future meeting. In addition, I think we're going to bring back a revised page 1 of the agenda with the changes that were discussed. Is that correct?
Yes, and then the posting of the code.
Correct.
And then the annual
Once
review.
approved.
Once approved.
Once approved,
Yes, and then
yes.
the annual review.
Yes. Okay,
yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Capture it all? How we doing? Move on? Need a break? Move on? Looks like we're going to move forward. Okay, we're moving on to item C3, advisory body financial review of the Water Reclamation Facility Program. I'll turn it over to Mr. Collins, our city manager, for his report.
Thank you, Mayor Heading, Council. Scott Collins, City Manager. So the recommendation before you is that City Council revise the Citizen Finance Advisory Committee roles and responsibilities to now include review of the financial aspects of the Water Reclamation Facility, or WRF, program, and relieve the Water Reclamation Facility Citizen Advisory Committee, WRFCAC, of that responsibility while maintaining the WRFCAC role, a very important role of reviewing and providing an opportunity for community input on the remaining technical components of the WRF program. To try to make this really short, because I know there might be deliberation. Back in the end of November, City Council directed staff to bring back an item for this council to consider, separating the functions of the WRFCAC and CFAC so that the financial aspects of the WRF would be brought to the CFAC, and the WRFCAC would continue to deal with the technical issues of the WRF. Just a little bit of background. You did hear a really good synopsis of the CFAC from the current chair of that committee, Barbara Spagnola. So I won't go into too much detail other than to say it started out as the Measure Q Oversight Committee, which was a citizen referendum that approved a tax increase, and the Measure Q Committee was part of that, the resolution that made that tax go into effect, that basically is the overseer of that money, make sure it's being spent on the things that City Council promised they would be doing. And we've upheld our end of the bargain. They've been very key in holding us accountable, but also looking at new ways to improve not only how we conduct our financial business internally, but how we demonstrate to the public that we are being held accountable, and also to make the ease and use of understanding the financial transactions, especially the budget and accounting, translatable to the common person out there in the community. And I think by and large they've been very successful at doing that. Currently the CFAC membership is 10 members. That includes individuals with substantial experience in financial matters, such as procurement, budgeting, accounting, investing, and project controls. We are very, very fortunate to have such experienced members of the community serving on that committee. The WRFCAC, which was originally named the WRF Technical Review Committee, was created back in May of 2014 with rather general direction to inform the process of developing a new WRF. Obviously at that time, City Council was pivoting from the original project of building near the existing site following the Coastal Commission denial of permit into a new direction of seeking out new sites. The WRF CAC was renamed August 2014 to that title. Now includes 9 appointees, which is 1 member of the Planning Commission, 1 member of the Public Works Advisory Committee, and 7 at large. with an interest and, importantly, a knowledge in water resources and the development of the new wharf. City Council further revised their mission statement in January 2018, largely to correspond with the community goals that were adopted by Council for the wharf program. At that same meeting in January of 2018, City Council did discuss the notion of transferring financial oversight responsibilities of the wharf from WharfCAC to CFAC, but no action was taken at that time. WharfCAC is now down to a membership of 7 appointees. I should make that noted. 1 member of Planning Commission, 1 member of PWAB, and 5 at-large members. As I mentioned in an earlier agenda report, the WharfCAC will be the largest city capital expense, the biggest project we will take on, and warrants significant oversight from staff, council, and the community. And they are provided that through the WharfCAC. The WharfCAC has been tremendously important, serving that vital role of not only the technical expertise in addition to what the staff and our consultants bring to the table, but also providing an opportunity for the community to have an additional input into that process of the program overall. They've served their community well. They served the city very well in doing that, and have come up with very thoughtful recommendations to City Council on a whole host of technical issues related to the project, including contracting, looking at permitting issues, the siting, just a whole number of issues that have been, again, both the technical review and then having another opportunity for a community to have input before it comes to City Council to make these tough decisions. We're in a new phase, or beginning to move into a new phase for the program overall. Moving out of the planning phase into design and eventual construction, potentially within this year. And as such, the focus is really shifting to financial stewardship of the overall WHRF program. The WHRF-CAC, for the most part, as it relates to financial oversight, have really reviewed at the higher level, the general level. And my personal opinion, and I would say most people, is that they've performed really ably in that regard. However, we do have the CFAC, which has the technical experts in the financial matters, and who have been taking on similar review of city reports at a more granular level and more comprehensive level on other city matters over the past couple years. And staff's opinion, and I think this was council's opinion when this was directed for us to look at it, is that this committee may be better suited to take on the overall review of the financial components of the WHRF, and that the WHRF-CAC would be able to resume its responsibility of providing very important input into the process for the City Council to consider as it relates to a lot of the remaining issues, the technical issues, particularly around the hydrogeological issues and reports and analysis and water reclamation components of the project, and obviously other things, including potentially just regular program updates and review. And we feel that the two committees will provide substantial overview by the community boards, but also provide even more additional opportunities for public input into the process. So that is the recommendation before you, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have about either the committees or any other questions you may have.
Thank you for that report. We'll turn to council. Who'd like to start us off with questions?
I have a quick one.
Thank you. Yes.
Has CFAC been consulted on this change?
Our finance director, who is the staff member for the CFAC, did submit an email late last week informing them of this potential change. We received emails from the chair and one member of the committee, Bart Beckman, and both were in support of this. I don't know if we heard from anybody else. Jen?
No, those were the only two responses.
Other questions?
Yes. CFAC meets monthly, is that correct?
That is correct. They're a standing committee, which should note the WRF-CAC is a special advisory committee, kind of lives with the project. Its singular focus is on the project, whereas CFAC is a standing committee that's has a broader scope.
So, since that is the case, and WRF-CAC is not meeting very often at the moment, we would have more consistent oversight of the finances by shifting them to CFAC?
I think there's a couple ways to answer that. With the onboarding of Carollo engineers, they've revamped, or in the process of revamping, our financial reporting, as well as with the assistance of OpenGov and our finance team, especially Finance Director Jen Calloway, that we're able to produce reports that are easily understood by the common person, but also can be digested at a more granular level by technical experts. So the intention would be to bring those back at a more routine basis. The question is which committee would be better served to review those and ask the tough questions as it relates to the financial components. That's where we see that it's coming together at a good time to have this discussion with council, as we have that capability to produce those reports, to have those discussions, and it could be on a monthly basis if needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in response to Don's question, I asked Barbara last week about this, and she reminded me that she did make this recommendation 6 months ago. So she's on board. So.
Right. And one other note, with the WRF-CAC as it relates to the meeting consistency, as it is a special advisory committee, we hold the date for every month in case there is a need to have the meeting. If there's a decision point or an important component of the project that needs to be reviewed, it's brought forward that time. But if there isn't, there's no meeting. I think the public perception is that we're canceling meetings, and I think we're kind of set up in this catch-22, if you will, because we want to be able to hold the meeting date and time so that if there is a need, the members don't put something on their own calendars, right? But certainly it looks like we're canceling meetings, and that's not the intent. It's just to bring things forward when there is an actual decision for them to weigh in on.
Great.
Yeah, I just have one question. Would it make sense to also have CFAC look at the expenses on the capital improvement projects that are also included in the rate increase?
So those capital improvements will come forward with the budget review. So my assumption is we're bringing the budget to CFAC to review, so they'll have that opportunity to
They will anyway.
Provide. Right. They will anyway. Yeah, I think it's should be of an annual basis that they would be reviewing those capital expenditures.
Right, because they don't happen that frequently.
Correct.
Right. So after the fact, they would also then see it in the year-end.
In the year-end and likely in the quarterly reports as we move forward.
Great, good, thank you. That was my only question.
Great. Further questions?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll open up for public comment. Those willing to or wanting to make public comment on this agenda item, please step forward at this time. Welcome back, Nancy.
Thank you. Nancy Bass, Morro Bay. As I noted in a previous comment, the reassignment to the Financial Advisory Board of purview over the costs of construction of the new wastewater treatment plant and water reclamation project bears repeating. The costs of the project are integral to the construction details that the experienced and qualified engineers on the WRF-CAC committee have been familiar with for several years. They know what costs and plans are reasonable and valid. It is common sense that proper overview and recommendations cannot be made when half of the necessary information is missing. It renders the WRF-CAC committee useless. It renders Councilmember Heller, who is an engineer with actual such project experience, his only committee assignment also useless. The reassignment to the Financial Advisory Board is hard to understand when no members have expertise in engineering or construction, and it is not the purpose of that committee. This action appears meant to silence knowledgeable WRF-CAC opinion and freeze out any meaningful participation by Councilmember Heller. If the council has sincere interest in making the WRF, the best and cheapest project possible for the community, it will leave analysis of construction costs where they belong with the WRF-CAC. Schedule that committee consistently as a standing monthly meetings with all current information on progress. Since I'm the only one here and I'm done with that particular item, but your discussion of C1, I would like to say something about, and that is, if the delegation going to Washington, D.C. are going to speak with entities concerning earmarks for cleanup of the power plant site and wind energy entities, the water sewer rate payments should not be used to pay for any contacts that do not deal strictly with the WRF project.
Thank you, Nancy. Any other public comment regarding this item? If not, I will close public comment, bring it back to council, and I'm going to start with asking for a motion and then discussion following that, if there is a motion that anybody would like to make.
Sure. I will move staff's recommendation to revise the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee roles and responsibilities to include review of the financial aspects of the Water Reclamation Facility Program, relieve the Water Reclamation Facility Citizens Advisory Committee of that responsibility while maintaining the WRF-CAC role of reviewing and providing an opportunity for community input on the technical components of the WRF.
Motion by Councilmember Davis for staff recommendation.
Second.
There's second by Councilmember McPherson, and we will open it up for discussion. Any discussion on the motion? Yeah.
Well, I would start by saying that I was the council member that asked to have this agendized, and it really did stem from comments made by the chairperson of the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, who happens to also be the acting chair of the WRF-CAC committee. So she is very familiar with the workings of both committees and has been involved intimately in all of the discussions up to this point. And it was upon her advice that she recommended that especially at this point in the project when it is moving into a new phase and it's really implementing some of the plans that have already been made, that the financial aspects be transferred to CFAC, primarily because the financial expertise is with CFAC, not with the WRF-CAC. I would assume that the WRF-CAC, in considering any decisions that come before them, at this point forward would keep in mind the community goal, which is cost-effective solutions. So they're not going to be necessarily neglecting cost in their recommendations, but rather the financial reports on expenditures would go to CFAC for their review so that they would keep tabs on that project from a financial point of view. So that's the rationale that, from my point of view, for supporting the recommendation.
Thank you. Other discussion?
Just having sat on the CFAC, it makes a lot of sense to me, the kinds of things that come before the CFAC, that this goes with. It goes with the kinds of things that come before CFAC, and I think it's appropriate for it to be there.
Thank you. Councilmember Heller?
Yeah. So I met with Chair Spagnola this afternoon to talk about this issue because I think it's an important question. And I believe that the CFAC should be looking at high-level macro financial information in terms of funding and in that order. But I think that the WRF-CAC has a very important role to play that should not be ignored. I was fortunate enough to be on an oversight committee for a large bond program in a Southern California school district a number of years ago. And the role that the oversight committee played that I was on was basically we were citizens oversight. We got a monthly master milestone schedule from the program manager. We got a master project budget from the program manager, which we reviewed. We reviewed and were signatory to all payment applications to the contractors and consultants, and we reviewed and were signatory to all of the change order proposals that were presented and reviewed, presented by the contractors and consultants. And the benefit of doing this with the WRF-CAC in the hopes that we can get enough qualified people who are engineers or project managers is the technical issues of the project, of any project, directly relate to cost on a micro level. And that's really where the budget battles are won and lost. I think it would be a grave error to just deal with the macro numbers with the CFAC. I think the WRF-CAC has an important function. Many people in the community see the WRF-CAC as their only means of communication or learning about the project, which of course has a huge impact on community members. I think the WRF-CAC needs to perform this financial function, and I think it should be a standing committee, and I think it should meet every month until the room is empty and there are no more questions. If there's another avenue for people in the community to find out about the project and have their questions answered, I'd like to know what it is, if it's not the WRF-CAC. So I feel strongly that that financial component, that micro component, needs to be reviewed and managed by a WRF-CAC committee.
Thank you for your comments. I'll weigh in on this. Regarding public comment that was made to minimize Councilmember Heller's position as liaison to WRF-CAC, let me just restate that as a result of our action tonight, there is no new liaison to WRF-CAC. That's number one. Number two, in addition to that, this recommendation for review came months ago and not as a result of any election results. So I just wanted to comment on that. I have been significantly concerned about the inability of the WRF-CAC committee to receive financial reports, oversee, monitor, and even get financial reports regarding the WRF project. I personally, with the previous project manager, who was responsible, not the current, the previous, for producing financial reports, argued extensively for routine reporting, consistent reporting, and reporting that was representative of something that could be digested and understood by not only the existing then WRF-CAC subcommittee, that existed to review financial issues, which I understand no longer exists, and that didn't happen. As a result of having a new chief financial officer or finance officer in the organization, as well as now a very viable Citizens Finance Review Committee, we have the opportunity for not only the current viable reports to be reviewed by that advisory group, which contains a large number of individuals with significant financial backgrounds as well as project management backgrounds to review that. I appreciate Councilmember Heller's concern about indicating the need for the possibility of the technical component to be reviewed by WRF-CAC with regard to costs of projects, project management, etc. I really think that's a staff function and believe that we hire staff and we entrust staff to review, monitor, and report on that, and that it's not the responsibility of council to micromanage the organization. It's the responsibility of council to set policy. And therefore, I would, personally not agree with that observation. So with that, I too support the staff report. I think it's important in this phase of the project as we're moving forward to get close management. And remember, the final scrutiny occurs here. Everything is reported here. And there is certainly the opportunity to refer back to WRF-CAC any technical cost considerations that might be requested for review that the council may think would be significant. So with that, I will call the question. We have a motion and a second on the floor. It is a motion to move the staff report forward, and with that, I would ask for a roll call vote, unless there's further discussion. Thank you.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
No.
Mayor Heading?
Yes.
The motion carries 4-1 with Councilmember Heller opposed.
Thank you for that good discussion, and I'm going to call for a 3-minute timeout before we get to Chief for the final agenda item. So let's try to reconvene in 3 minutes.